I'm making this post because I can't sleep, or eat, or do anything in my day-to-day life anymore. I have tremors in my hands, a constant taste of pennies in the back of my throat, and a scar on my ribcage that opens when I press it. I'm writing it down because the second I stop thinking about it, it forces me to remember it with everything I do. I got the job because I needed the money. That's it. I was broke, my lease was up, and I couldn't keep digging through my couch for loose change to try and eat every day. My cousin knew a guy who managed a place called Hollow Willow Outreach. It sounded like a church, but with better branding. They did community support, such as food drives, counseling, and addiction recovery. A place for people who didn't have anyone or anything. They had a nice building, clean carpets, free coffee, and the kind of calm faces that make you lower your voice without thinking. I showed up in a button-up that didn't quite fit right, and tried to act like I wasn't desperate for a couple bucks. A young woman at the front desk smiled at me too hard. It felt practiced. "Are you here for the intake?" she asked, like this was a normal way to say, "New hire, I'm here for the interview," I said. She tilted her head. "Ah, the helping intake." I met the director, Elliot Rusk. He was maybe 40-ish. One of those men who keep their hair perfect and their voice so soft you can't put an age on them. He wore a plain sweater and a copper wedding band that was definitely too small for him, almost like it was meant for someone else's finger. He shook my hand with both of his. "You have very kind eyes," he said. No one has ever told me that. I laughed awkwardly. I'm good with people." I gulped. He studied my face like he was reading it. The whole time, his smile didn't change. Warm, simple, like a painting. "We don't pay much," he said. "But we do feed you. We keep you. We help you become whole." This is where I definitely should have known something was up, and I should have left, but the building was warm and coffee was free. And Elliot looked at me like he was proud of me for just existing. I started the next Monday. My first week was incredibly boring. I answered phones, stocked shelves, and drove donation boxes to storage. The people who came in were exactly what you'd expect. Tired, empty, and twitchy. Some were kind, some were mean in that way people get when they're hungry for something that isn't food. The staff were too nice. They didn't gossip, they didn't complain, they didn't swear. They laughed quietly, like loud joy was disrespectful. They all wore the same little pin on their shirts, a circle with a stake through it. I asked one guy, Matt, what it meant. He touched it with his fingertip like it was fragile. "Correction," he said. "It helps you remember who we're supposed to be." "Like spiritually?" He smiled. "Like biologically." He said it like a joke, but his eyes didn't move. At the end of my first week, Elliot asked me to stay late. The building emptied out, lights dimmed. The hum of the vending machine was corrupting the silence. Elliot led me down a hallway I hadn't been down yet. We passed offices, past a locker door with a keypad, past a wall of framed photos of smiling people holding those pins. The air changed the farther we went, colder and more humid, like the inside of a refrigerator. He stopped at another keypadded door. "Staff only," the sign above read. "Your staff," he said, still smiling. He punched in a code without looking at the pad. The door clicked open. The hallway beyond was unfinished concrete and bare drywall. The smell hit me like a train. Bleach and iron, like pennies and pool water. Somewhere far down the corridor, something dripped slowly. Drip, drip, drip. I stopped walking. "What is this place?" I asked. Elliot turned, with that smile. "This is where we do the work that can't be done in the sunlight." My mouth became dry and I managed to choke up a chuckle. "Okay, is this like AA stuff? Group therapy?" He looked genuinely confused. almost like I was speaking another language. "No," he said softly. "This is where we help you become whole." He put his hand on my shoulder and gripped tight, then guided me forward. We reached a room that looked like a hospital room, if a hospital room was designed by someone who'd only seen one in a nightmare. There were clean stainless steel tables, cabinets with glass doors, a rolling cart with instruments laid out neatly, scalpels, clamps, sutures, needles far too long to be used on anything human, and in the center, bolted to the floor, was a chair. Not a dentist chair, not a recliner. A heavy-duty, industrial chair with arm restraints and foot straps, like it belonged in an old loony bin. The leather was dark, cracked, and stained all over. My mouth became dry again. "Is this some kind of sick prank?" I said. My own voice sounded so far away. Elliot's hand stayed on my shoulder. His fingers were ice cold. "We don't prank, silly," he said. "We correct God's mistakes." He walked to one of the cabinets and opened it. Inside there were many jars. Not like mason jars with pickles. Thick glass jars with metal clamps, filled with yellow fluid. Chunky items floated in them like pale fruit. I saw what looked like a swollen finger, a slab of skin with black hair still on it, and a jar full of what looked like ears. My vision narrowed. I could hear my heartbeat like a war drum trying to thump its way out of my chest. "Elliot?" I said shakily, and I hated how small my voice was. "What the hell is this?" He closed the cabinet so softly it didn't make a click sound, like he didn't want to upset the jars. "You've been living," he said, "with gaps." "What?" He stepped closer. "Everyone has gaps. We are all born misaligned. You can feel it, can't you? That feeling like something inside you is missing? That you're walking around every day with a cavity that can't be filled?" I didn't answer. Because the sick part is, he wasn't wrong. I've had that feeling my whole life, like there's a hole inside me. Elliot smiled wider, and for the first time it looked strained. "We fill the gaps," he said. "We make people whole." He pointed to the chair. "Sit." I couldn't move. His voice didn't change. Still soft, still kind. "Sit," he repeated, and something in the air seemed to lean toward me, like the room itself was listening. "I'm getting out of here," I said, even though my legs didn't move. Elliot sighed, like I disappointed him. "I was really hoping you wouldn't fight," he said. "You have very kind eyes. People with kind eyes make the best vessels. They don't hold on so tight." "Vessels?" I echoed because my brain was latching onto words. He nodded excitedly. "For the correction." The next part is embarrassing. I don't like admitting it. I didn't get tackled. No one jumped out from behind a curtain and grabbed me. Elliot didn't start waving a gun around. He just looked at me and said, "You're safe here." And my body started to work against me, like I was put into some kind of trance with those 3 words. I sat in the chair. I hate myself for it. I still do. The restraints clicked shut. One of the staff members came in. A woman, maybe 30. Hair pulled tight, same pin on her shirt. She didn't speak. She checked my wrists and ankles like she was tucking a child into bed. "Wait," I said, trying to lift my arms. But they were already locked so tight any movement felt like the restraints would cut into me. Elliot leaned in close. His breath smelled like mint. "Don't be afraid," he giggled. "Fear makes the seam rough." "What seam?" The woman took a syringe from the cart. It had to have been the thickest needle. It looked like it belonged in an animal tranquilizer kit. I tried to jerk away, but the chair held tight. The more I pulled and moved, the more the metal restraints bit and cut. "Stop," I cried. Stop, I didn't sign up for this. I'm calling the police, and when they get here, they will wipe that grin off of your face. Elliot stared into my soul with those dark green eyes and crazed smile. Your phone is upstairs, he said calmly. The needle went into my arm. The cold flooded my veins. Not like numbing, like winter lake water. My fingers tingled, then went heavy. My tongue felt too big in my mouth. The room blurred at the edges, but the center stayed sharp. Too sharp. I could see every crack on Elliot's lips, every tiny scratch on the metal straps, and every speck of dust that floated into the light. I tried to scream, and all that came out was a wet moan. Good, Elliot murmured. You're still present. That's important. He pulled on gloves. The woman wheeled the cart closer. Metal clinked. Elliot picked up a tool, not a scalpel. Something shaped like a thin, curved hook with a handle, like a crochet needle from hell. Where are you? I tried again, but my words slurred. Elliot pressed his cold, long fingers against my sternum, right in the center of my chest, and I felt something in me respond. Not pain, not yet. More like pressure, like something inside recognized his touch. Here, he said softly. Your gap is here. I can feel it. A little hollow, a little gap. That means only a little correction. My heartbeat sped up so fast it felt like I was trying to leap up my throat and into my lap. He placed the hook against my skin. I expected a cut. I expected a sting. Instead, the hook sank into me like I was made of warm wax. I couldn't process it. My brain rejected it. The hook slid into my chest without any resistance, and I felt it inside me, rummaging around gently like a finger stirring soup. A sound came out of me that I didn't recognize as mine. A small, animalistic noise. Elliot's eyes closed, like he was listening to music. There you are, silly. He giggled. Do you feel it? God's mistake? The hook rotated and caught onto something inside me. He tugged. My body responded not with blood but with movement. My chest skin bulged outward in a line, like something beneath it was being pulled toward the surface. It looked like a zipper being drawn from the inside. I could feel it, a tearing sensation, but not like ripping flesh, like separating two things that had been stuck together like old Velcro. Elliot continued to yank and pull. My sternum split. It didn't crack or snap. It was one straight line from the base of my throat down to my stomach. A seam appeared and parted. My skin peeled back in two neat flaps, revealing not organs, not ribs, but something else entirely. A cavity. A smooth, glistening interior. Pale pink, lined with fine, vibrating hairs like the inside of a dog's ear. It pulsed. It breathed. It was waiting. I tried to throw up, but my stomach was strapped in. My mouth filled with saliva, and I swallowed it in with panicked gulps. Elliot smiled like a proud father. See? He said. You were made with mistakes. The woman opened a cabinet behind him. I heard glasses clink and liquid slosh. She returned holding a jar. Inside floated something that looked like a thick knot of pale tissue, fibrous and threaded with veins. It wasn't an organ, I recognized. It was too symmetrical, like it had been grown in a lab. Little pores dotted its surface, and each one pulsed erratically, like it was excited. Elliot took the jar with reverence. This, he said, is what will correct you. Correct the mistakes that God has bestowed upon you. He opened it. The smell punched my nostrils. It smelled like sweet rot and antiseptic, like flowers left in a hospital room too long. He reached in with his gloved hand and lifted that thing out. It dripped yellow, viscous fluid down his wrist. The pores quivered, reacting to the air. to the light, and to me. I started to sob, silently, because my body couldn't make any more sound. "Please," I begged through my breath. "Please don't." Elliot looked genuinely sad. "Oh," he whispered. "You think this is harmful?" He leaned in, holding the thing above my open chest. "This is your correction," he said. "This is our love. This is being made whole." He lowered it into my cavity. The moment it touched me, my entire body arched against the restraints, cutting into my wrists even deeper. Warm crimson red dripped off the arms of the chair. Drip, drip, drip. Pain exploded through my nerves. Not sharp, not burning, but invasive. Like 1,000 tiny fingers pushing into places they didn't belong. The furs latched onto inside me, and I felt them connect. Suck. Fuse. My vision went white. Somewhere far away, a low hum began, like a choir warming up, except it wasn't outside. It was in my bones. Elliot's voice seemed to come from what sounded like underwater. "Breathe," he said. "Let it settle." I couldn't breathe. My lungs locked. The thing inside me pulsed, and with each pulse, my ribs felt like they were being violently rearranged. Not broken, but shifted like they were being shuffled into a different pattern. I felt a pop beneath my collarbone, then another, then the wet, soft, warm sensation of something growing where it shouldn't. My throat made a choking sound and something warm ran down my chin. Blood, dark and thick. The hum grew louder and I realized it had words. Not words I understood. Words that sounded like someone trying to speak through water and teeth at the same time. Elliot stepped back, hands lifted, eyes shining. "Yes," he breathed. "Yes, you hear it." I heard it. I hated that I heard it, because underneath the pain, underneath the terror, there was a sensation like relief, like a pressure you didn't realize you were carrying, finally being let out. Like scratching an itch you've had since birth. The thing inside me pulsed again, and this time my body responded automatically. My mouth opened, and I spoke. Not English, not anything I'd ever learned. A wet, layered sound came out of my throat, like two voices stacked on top of each other. I felt it vibrate in my teeth, in my sinuses, in the seam of my chest. Elliot's face went slack with joy, like he'd been waiting years for that very sound. The woman beside him bowed her head. Elliot whispered, "Welcome." I blacked out. When I woke up, my shirt was back on. My chest wasn't open, but there was a scar. Not a normal scar. Thin and pale. Perfectly straight down the center of my torso, like someone had stitched me shut with invisible thread. I was in one of the upstairs counseling rooms on a couch with a blanket tucked around me, like I had just come down with a cold. A cup of water was on the table. Elliot sat across from me with his hands folded. I shot upright so fast my vision swam. "What did you do?" I said, and my voice was hoarse, scratchy, like I'd been screaming for hours. Elliot's expression was gentle, almost amused. "We helped you," he said. "You did beautifully." I clutched my shirt and yanked it up. The scar stared back at me. My skin around it looked stretched, slightly raised, like there was something underneath pressing outward. I pressed my fingers on it. It pushed back. Not like swelling, like something breathing. I scrambled off the couch, stumbling toward the door. It was unlocked. Of course it was. They didn't need locks. I clumsily ran through the building, out into the cold air, half expecting someone to tackle me, to drag me back downstairs. No one followed. The streets outside were normal. Cars passed. A man walked his basset hound. The sky was an ugly winter gray. I almost cried from how normal it all was. I got in my car and drove. I don't even remember where. I just drove until my hands cramped from gripping the wheel so long. That night, I tried to convince myself it was a nightmare. I took a shower so hot my skin turned red. I scrubbed my chest until it stung. I stood in front of the mirror and told myself scars don't breathe. Then I heard it, a faint hum, deep in my rib cage, like a lullaby. I pressed my palm to my chest and felt it vibrate under my skin, and something inside me shifted, like it was getting comfortable. I didn't go to the hospital. How do I tell anyone this? Hi, I think a non-profit organization opened my body like a jacket and put a new organ in me that sings. They'd sedate me, strap me down, cut me open, and if they found anything, if they touched it, I don't know what it would do. So I did what people do when they're afraid. I pretended it wasn't real. I went back to work. I told myself I'd go to the police. I told myself I'd record it, gather evidence, burn the place down if I had to. I walked into Hollow Willow Outreach the next day with a knot of dread hanging in my stomach. The woman at the front desk smiled. "Feeling better?" she asked. I froze. "How did you?" She tilted her head like before. "Your seam is cleaner today," she said and went back to typing. I backed away and nearly ran into Matt. He looked at me with bright, shining eyes. "You heard it," he whispered through his smile. I swallowed hard. "What is it?" He touched his own pin. "Correction," he said again. "Now you understand how you're supposed to be." I tried to quit that day. I tried to tell Elliot I was leaving. He listened patiently in his office like a therapist. When I finally ran out of words, he smiled wider. "You can go," he said. Relief hit me so hard my knees went weak. Then he added calmly, "But you'll come back." I stared at him. "I won't." Elliot leaned forward. "You will," he said, still soft. "Because the gap is corrected now, and it doesn't like being alone." I laughed, sharp and desperate. "You've lost your mind." Elliot's eyes flicked briefly to my chest. "You haven't slept," he said. "You've been hearing it, and soon you'll start to taste it." My mouth filled with a penny taste. Offering proof, he sat back. "We don't trap people," he said. "We correct them. The world does the trapping. We just open the seam." I left. I didn't come back. For 2 weeks I tried to live normal. I went to work at a different job. I ate. I watched TV. I texted friends. I laughed at jokes and pretended my laughter didn't have a second echo underneath it. At night, the humming got louder. It started to have rhythms, patterns. It began to sync with my breathing, like it was training me. Sometimes, right as I drifted off, I'd feel it push against my ribs and I would jolt awake, gasping, with my hands gripping at my chest like I was trying to hold myself closed. Then came the dreams. Always the same hallway of concrete. The chair, the instruments, and a door at the end of the hall I hadn't noticed before. In my dream, I always walked toward it. I always reached for the handle, and right before I could touch it, I'd wake up with my chest itching so badly I'd scratch until my nails broke skin. One night, I woke up with blood and fragments of skin under my fingernails, and a thin line down my sternum that hadn't been there when I fell asleep. Not a cut, a seam, barely visible at first, like my skin had been pressed together and was starting to come apart. I stumbled to the bathroom mirror and pulled my shirt up with shaking hands. The scar was there, but now it looked active. The skin around it puckered the lips. I touched it, and it quivered under my finger. The hum rose in response like it was pleased. almost like a purring cat. I gagged. I splashed water on my face and I tried to breathe, and then I heard something else. A sound from my own chest that wasn't humming. A quiet, wet click. Like something unlatching. The seam twitched, and for a second, only a second, it opened a hair's width. I felt cold air touch something inside me that had never felt air before. My knees slammed onto the tile. I sat there, hunched over, holding myself like I was trying to keep my insides from falling out. I understood, very clearly, that this was not a scar. This was a door. After that, it got worse fast. Food started tasting wrong. Anything with meat made my stomach twist in knots. I started craving things that weren't food. Salty, metallic, sharp. Once, while doing dishes, I stared at a box of razor blades under the sink for so long I forgot what I was doing. The hum would change when I was near certain people. It would be quiet around strangers, like it was hiding. It would swell around anyone wearing that stupid little pin, even if they were across a grocery store aisle. The day I saw Matt again, it nearly tore me open. I was walking downtown trying to keep busy, when I heard a voice behind me. "You're fraying." I spun around. Matt stood there like he'd been waiting. He wore his pin. His eyes looked too bright, too awake. I took a step back. "Don't." He held his hands out, palms up. "We're worried," he said. "Elliot says you're suffering." "I'm not." My chest seized. A pressure built behind my sternum, like someone pushing from inside with both fists. I gasped and clutched my shirt. Matt's eyes softened. "It hates being ignored," he said. "It hates being alone." The seam burned. I felt the skin on my chest start to separate, not from an external cut, but from within, like it remembered how easily it could open. I stumbled backward, bumping into a lamppost. People around us didn't notice, or if they did, they looked away too quickly, like their eyes slid off me. Matt stepped closer. "You can fight it," he murmured. "Or you can come back and let us tend to you. The seam can get infected if you force it shut." I made a sound that might have been a laugh, but it broke halfway through into a sob. "I don't want this," I choked. Matt's voice went softer. "No one wants correction," he said. "But once you've been filled, you don't get to go back to being empty." My seam fluttered. I felt it, not like an injury, like a mouth trying to speak, and then right there on the sidewalk, my chest opened. Not fully, just a thin split down the scar line. A wet, gleaming chunk of skin peeked into the outside world. The air hit it and the humming turned into a thrilled, hungry vibration that made my teeth ache. Matt stared at it with something like reverence. "Oh," he whispered. "It's calling." I slammed my hands over it, pressing hard enough to hurt. I don't know how I got away. I don't remember. I just remember running, hands clamped to my chest, feeling something inside me pulse against my palm like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. That night, I barricaded the door. I taped my shirt down with duct tape. Like that would help. I sat on my bed with a kitchen knife in my hand, shaking. I told myself if it opened, I'd cut it out. I told myself I'd rip myself apart before I let them have me. Somewhere around 3 a.m., the humming stopped. The silence was worse. I held my breath and listened. A deafening groan erupted from my chest. The seam on my chest began to open. I took my shot. I gripped the knife hard and gritted my teeth before sinking the blade into my own chest. That same feeling like cutting into warm wax. I pressed harder and further, pushing against the parasite. It let out a symphony of screams and cries. My legs went weak and buckled. I didn't care if I cut past the demon that lived in my chest as long as I didn't have to give myself to that thing. I took the blade halfway out so I could punch it with the piercing point on my cold steel savior. Crunch. Snap. A blinding hot pain exploded from within me. In my horror, both of my top ribs were facing outward. Points of blood and mucus-covered bone were sticking out of my skin. We let out a synchronized blood-curdling scream. I jammed the knife back in with what little strength I had left. I felt the blade puncture its rubbery membrane. A geyser of yellow and red fluid sprayed from the seam, tearing the edges as it sprayed my bedroom's carpet. I don't know how long I sat on that bedroom floor with a knife sticking halfway out of me, and covered in that fluid that smelled like antiseptic rot. When I pulled the knife out, the parasite let out a soft whisper, before my seam slowly closed with little wet snaps and pops. Then I heard it, a knock at my door, not loud, not urgent, polite. I didn't move. My whole body went cold. The knife shook in my grip. Another knock, then a voice through the wood, calm and warm. You didn't kill it. You only wounded it and made it angrier with you. That was a mistake, it said. I didn't respond. The voice continued, like it knew I was there. We brought you something, Elliot said, to soothe you both. I swallowed hard, tasting pennies. The hum started again, faint like it was waking up. My chest scar tingled. Go away, I groaned. Elliot laughed softly. I understand, he said. It feels like you are losing a battle, and you are correct. A pause, then gently. But you were never correct to begin with. The doorknob turned. I'd locked it. I'd chained it. I'd shoved a chair under it. The knob turned anyway. The chain rattled as if someone was lifting it from the outside with careful fingers. My chest seam burned hot, hot as lava. The humming swelled into a choir. This is the part that makes me most feel sick writing all this, is that the thing inside me wasn't afraid. It was excited. The door cracked open. Elliot stepped in like he belonged there, like he was visiting a friend. Behind him were two others in plain sweaters, the woman from downstairs and Matt. They all wore their pins. Elliot held a jar in his hands. Inside was another one of those pale, twitching knots. This is for you, he said. I tried to stand, tried to run, but my legs didn't work right. My body felt heavy, like gravity had doubled. Elliot's gaze dropped to my chest. Ah, he whispered, almost tender. You poor thing. How bad did this bad man hurt you? My hands clung into my shirt. The duct tape had started peeling away on its own, curling like dead skin. The seam beneath it pulsed. Elliot stepped closer. I told you, he said softly, you would come back. I didn't, I whispered. You came here. Elliot smiled. We're not separate, he said. Not anymore. He reached out. The moment his fingers touched my sternum, my chest opened like it wanted him. The seam parted wide, skin folding back neatly. The pale interior glistened, vibrating with hunger. I screamed, but it sounded wrong, layered like something else screamed with me. Elliot leaned in, eyes shining. You see? He whispered. It recognizes family. God, I hate this. Matt stepped forward and lifted his own shirt. He had the same seam, the same scar. He opened it with 2 fingers, casually, like unzipping a jacket. Inside him, I saw it. Not just one knot. Several. A whole cluster of pale, pulsing organs stacked and intertwined, stitched into him like a grotesque bouquet of tumors. Some of them had grown outward, pressing against his ribs so his chest looked subtly reshaped. His skin stretched thin over certain bulges. His hum was louder than mine, more confident. He smiled at me with wet eyes. "It hurts at first," he whispered. "Then it feels like being loved." Elliot raised the jar. "Open wider," he told me gently. My body obeyed. I felt the seam tear wider. I felt the interior hairs vibrate in anticipation. I felt myself make room. My mind screamed no, but my body, my door said yes. Elliot lowered the new beast towards me, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The pores on it weren't just twitching. They were shaped like tiny mouths. Little puckered openings that flexed and tasted the air. The thing inside me surged toward them. My chest cavity rippled, like a throat swallowing. Elliot smiled, delighted. "Easy," he murmured. "Help him. Help your family and take what is rightfully yours. Correction." The moment the new knot touched my interior, it latched. The tiny mouth sealed against the vibrating hairs with wet clicks. Pain flashed, sharp and hot, but underneath it was that horrible relief again, like scratching a lifelong itch until you bleed and you're still wanting more. I felt it connect, and then I felt it spread. Threads shot out from it, thin as hair but strong, burrowing into me. They wrapped around my ribs, around my lungs, around my heart like snakes seeking a rodent. Each thread pulled gently, firmly, rearranging me. I choked, gasping. Elliot watched like a proud artist. "Perfect." He laughed hysterically. "You're taking them so well." Matt stepped closer, voice shaking with excitement. "Do you hear it?" he asked. I did, not just humming now. Voices. Many voices. Some in my bones, some in my teeth, some in the seam itself, whispering in wet, layered syllables. I realized the words weren't random. They were instructions, directions, a map. Elliot leaned close enough that his breath wet my cheek. "You're going to help us," he whispered, "because you're correct now." I tried to shake my head, but my neck felt too heavy. Elliot's hand slid down my open seam and rested inside me like he belonged there. Palm pressed against the pulsing knot. He closed his eyes. "I can feel it," he murmured. "It likes you. It's growing fast." Something under my left rib shifted. A bulge pressed outward, round and firm, like a fist pushing from inside. I screamed again. The bulge moved. It traveled under my skin, sliding upward like a thing crawling beneath a blanket. It reached my collarbone and stopped. Then it pushed. My skin stretched, went white, then split in a thin line as something sharp pressed out. Not bone, not metal. A pale, wet spike emerged, covered in clear mucus, like a tooth growing where no tooth belonged. Elliot opened his eyes and smiled. "A marker," he whispered. "You're becoming visible." Matt stared, tears streaming. "You're so lucky," he breathed. I couldn't breathe. My chest was a living door, my body rearranging itself around a parasite that felt like love if love was a trap. Elliot withdrew his hand and finally, gently, pushed my skin flaps closed. The seam zipped itself shut with a series of wet clicks. The scar sealed, smooth and pale, except now there was a lump under it. Multiple lumps, like knots under fabric. Elliot patted my chest like he was soothing a pet. You'll feel sore, he said. Drink water. Avoid sharp objects. Don't pick at your seam. Don't let him hurt you ever again. He stood, straightening his sweater, calm as ever. We'll see you tomorrow, he said. Then they left, just like that. My door closed, but the hum didn't stop. It never stops now. Here's the part I'm stuck on. The part that makes my hands shake as I type. They didn't need to restrain me anymore, because when they were gone, and I was alone in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the choir in my ribs. And my first thought wasn't, how do I get this out? My first thought was, what if they're right? What if I was missing something? What if the horrible relief is the only honest feeling I've had in years? That's when I knew I was in real trouble, because I don't trust myself now. I don't trust the way my body leans towards certain places when I walk past them. I don't trust the way my hands drift to my chest in my sleep. I don't trust the way my mouth waters when I smell blood, even my own. And I don't trust the thing inside me that's learning my routines. 2 days ago, I woke up with my shirt folded neatly on the floor. My scar was exposed, and there were fingerprints around it. Not mine. Small, damp prints, like someone with wet hands had pressed against my sternum and tested the seam. Last night, I found one of those pins on my kitchen counter. I don't remember picking it up. I don't remember going outside, but it was there. A circle with a stake going vertically through it. Correction. I threw it in the trash. I took the trash outside immediately. This morning it was back on my counter. Clean, dry, waiting. So I'm writing this now because I need someone, anyone, to know that if you see Hollow Willow Outreach, if you see their food drives or their smiling volunteers or their little pins, you do not go inside. You do not let them touch you. You do not accept their coffee, no matter how good it smells. And if you've ever had that feeling like there's an empty space inside you, like you're walking around with a hole inside you, please understand that there are people out there who can fill that gap, and they don't see it as a pain, they see it as an invitation. The last thing Elliot said to me, quiet and warm like a blessing, keeps replaying in my head. You'll come back. The worst part is, I don't know if he meant me, or the things that are trying to slither and claw their way out of my chest. My wife Madison and I are serious board gamers. We like the complicated ones best that take 2 to 3 hours to complete. Our good friend Jake is even more of a gamer than we are. He's single and can afford the latest releases, so we often test them at his place. This past weekend, he got a hold of a new board game and texted us. I bought the coolest one ever. You guys should come over and play it. My wife and I were ecstatic. A night of gaming was just the break we needed. We hired a babysitter, got our house in order, and headed over to Jake's apartment for an evening of fun. After we stepped into Jake's apartment, we were surprised to see a beautiful woman setting up a table in the living room. Hi everyone, Jake beamed, introducing us to his companion. This is Liz. She's my new girlfriend. Your girlfriend? I asked. Yeah, she's super into board games. Madison and I made our introductions. Liz seemed nice, but we were struck by her appearance. You see, Jake is what most people would describe as average looking. He rarely took care of his appearance and always wore the same clothes. Liz, in contrast, resembled a glittery influencer. She was clearly out of his league. Nice to meet you, Liz said and shook my hand. Her skin felt surprisingly cold against mine. Let's get this thing going. Jake slapped my back and motioned us to our seats. The board game was a mixture of all our favorites. There were elements of the classics, but enough new mechanics to keep things interesting. All throughout the game, I pushed myself, desperate to outdo Jake. "So close," he'd tease, scooping up a handful of resources from the bank. "But not ready to play with the big boys yet." About 30 minutes in, I noticed Liz casting glances at me. They were intense and focused, almost like she was checking me out. I leaned over to my wife and whispered, "You seeing this?" She glanced up from her cards. "What?" "Jake's girlfriend won't stop looking at me." Madison rolled her eyes and nudged my arm. "Sure, honey, you wish." But as the night went on, she began noticing it too. After a few more rounds, Madison began her questioning. "So, Liz, how long have you lived in Northern California?" "Oh, since I was 17, Liz said, playing with her hair. "I left for a few years, but came back." She gave Jake a heart-pounding kiss. "It's been so nice having this stud muffin around." "Stud muffin?" I glanced at my friend. "He's certainly no stud muffin. Maybe she likes his personality or sense of humor." I pushed away my thoughts and continued playing. After a few more rounds, Jake yawned and scooted out of his seat. "Anyone else want some popcorn? I'm starving." "I'll take some," Madison said. "I'll come with you." I got up and followed Jake out of the room. Once we were out of earshot, I pulled him aside. "Dude, what's up with your girlfriend?" "What do you mean?" "She keeps staring at me." Jake did a back and forth over his shoulder. "Okay, I know she's strange, but deep down she's a good person. Only problem is, she has this addiction. I can't keep her off me. She's like draining me every chance she gets." His eyes sparkled. "It's wonderful." "Just tell her to stop staring at me." Okay, I'll ask her to chill out. Relax, man. She's just free-spirited is all." Once the popcorn was ready, I grabbed a bowl and followed Jake back into the living room. I was surprised to see Madison and Liz were gone. No sooner had I set the bowl on the table than the back door opened. Madison and Liz stepped inside. "Oh, hey, honey. Did you want a soda, water, or—" "No, thanks." Madison fixed her collar, like she was hiding something. "Is everything all right?" "Yes." She crept back to the table, then froze mid-step, as if short-circuiting. "Actually, I need to use the restroom. BRB." She hurried out, and I furrowed my brow, confused by her behavior. After what seemed like a good 20 minutes, Madison's voice drifted in from the hall. "Will, can you come here for a second?" "Sure, babe." I got up and followed her voice. As soon as I reached the bathroom door, a pair of cold hands yanked me inside. "Yo, what the—" It was Madison. She was already lunging for my neck, her fingers tearing at my collar. "Babe, what are you—" "I'm sorry, sweetie. I'm just so hungry." "Hungry?" I shoved her off. "What are you talking about?" "You guys ready?" Jake's voice bled in from the living room. "Give me 5 seconds." I faced Madison, trying to ward her off. "Seriously, what's going on?" "I just need one bite." There was a loud banging at the door. "Come on, popcorn's getting cold." "I'll be right there." I turned and gasped at my wife's expression. Her gaze seemed feral and ravenous, like a mountain lion sizing up its prey. "Just one." Screw this. I grabbed the door handle and noticed for the first time a bite mark on her neck. "What the—" Madison opened her jaws, revealing tiny incisor-like fangs. "Please, it'll really help." She leapt toward me and I dove behind her, grabbed a towel and pinned her arms to her side. Straining, I set the towel between her jaws and pulled tight, like I was securing an alligator. "Let go of me," her voice hissed. I must have backed into the door and nudged the handle because we were soon stumbling into the hall. "Nice of you to join us." Jake's voice groaned from the living room. I turned to see him lying on the table. Liz was hunched over him, feasting on his flesh like a rat devouring raw meat. "What?" She sat up, wiped the blood from her lips. "What is this? What are you? What did you do to my wife?" Liz swallowed a pile of gore. "All I did was teach her how to be beautiful, like me." I stared at Jake in horror. Disgusting bite marks covered his body. They seemed festered with infections, leaking out blood and pus. He was still alive. Somehow. "Give me your flesh." Madison ripped the towel free and reached a hand behind her, almost tearing my left ear off. "The hell?" I shoved her into the wall and sprinted past Liz and booked it for the front door. "Don't let him escape," is all I heard as I wrenched it open and leapt outside. I managed to hide in the neighbor's bushes. Thankfully, nobody saw me enter. I watched as Madison exited the apartment and wandered along the road calling for me. Liz came out shortly after. I watched them sweep the block and stop at my car, peering in to see if I was hiding there. I could still hear Jake moaning from inside his apartment. It sounded like he was dying. After a few minutes, Liz and Madison gave up searching and returned to his place. It's been quiet for some time now. I know that if I can just book it to the car and call the police, I can make it out of this. I'm going to make a run for it. Wish me luck. I was never good connecting with people. That is why I ended up in this forum. A hole where we go. The ones that hate our office jobs but are too tired to quit. The kind of places where one enters to feel connection with real people while surrounded by gaudiness. That is where I met Jay. There was no magical connection. We were just two boring guys throwing stuff about our jobs in the general chat at 2 a.m. At the start, I thought Jay was a dedicated troll or a roleplay writer very deep in his character. His complaints were weird. He didn't complain about the air conditioning. He complained that the oxygen filters of Sector 4 tasted like rust. He didn't talk about the subway. He spoke of the magnetic capsules that always vibrate too much. I followed the current because it was fun. It was better than working on my spreadsheets. But with time, it stopped being funny. Jay was not inventing anything. He spoke of the Great Blackout of '85 like it was basic history from primary school. His descriptions of what he saw through his window gave me chills. He didn't speak of the gray sky of always. He described a city that looked like a living organism, with buildings of glass and metal growing upwards like mushrooms, eating the horizon I thought I knew. Jay wrote to me from 2112. And the worst is that our lives were equally pathetic. Until Jay got the job. Core maintenance. Jay was out of himself when they hired him. He told me the city finally was going to wake up, that the arrival of the new biotech systems was going to change everything, and that he would be there in first line. I remember his message. He was euphoric. "We don't use silicone anymore. Cabron, it is meat. Processors of neuronal tissue. Living hardware. They have veins. You can feel how they pulse." He felt like a kid with a new toy. Said the machine was going to manage reality. That there would be no more traffic or blackouts because the system predicted the needs before anyone even thought them. Finally, he felt his talent was not going to rot in an office, but that he was building the future. I was happy for him. And then, I got run over. Nothing cinematic. An Uber skipped a stop sign while I was crossing. 3 weeks in the hospital, broken clavicle, and a depression of a horse. I lost my cell phone in the accident, and honestly, when I got out, I didn't have desire to talk to anyone, not even Jay. I isolated myself. Months passed. I convinced myself Jay was just a crazy guy with too much free time or a role player with much imagination. I forgot the topic until 3 hours ago. My phone vibrated. Unknown number, local area code, but with too many digits. It was Jay. The message wasn't a formal letter. It was paragraphs vomited, full of finger errors, written by someone who knows his time is ending. Don't apologize. Don't even try to explain why you disappeared those months. I already know. When I entered the core registry to see what had failed in my life, I saw the tree of causes and effects. I saw your name there, lost between millions of data. I saw the report of your traffic accident, the car model, your clavicle diagnosis, the exact days you would pass unconscious. The system had it registered in its map of certainties since decades ago. The system knew you were going to shut up. It read that pain and trauma would keep you far from the keyboard enough time so my loneliness reached critical point. You are just like everyone else. One more adjustment variable, friend. In the core registry, I saw the simulation. It was a perfect video. I was on the walkway of Sector 7. I saw how my body leaned. I don't know if I slipped on oil or if simply my muscles gave up, but I saw myself falling direct to the main generator. And the sound? God, it wasn't a scream. It was that violent buzz of high tension, a dry crack, and then that electric hiss that vibrates in your teeth. I saw myself cooking in a discharge of 400,000 volts, and the system played it again and again like it was a tutorial. Jay told me he tried to change it. Reported sick, locked in his room. But the system doesn't manufacture the future. It predicts it with cold exactitude. Yesterday arrived a mandatory work order. Priority Alpha. The place? Sector 7. The task: repair a logic error on the walkway, and attached to the work order came the file of closing of my shift. Cause of leave? Work accident. It wasn't a threat, it was an administrative fact. The system already had processed my death to square the accounts of the quarter. You don't understand, the message followed. It's not that they want to kill me. It is that the system already knew about my imminent death. My absence had already been covered months before it happened. The system needs that failure to activate the renovation protocol of the sector. My death is a logical consequence. I am a statistic sacrifice in a spreadsheet that has no feelings. The worst is that, reading it, I didn't feel rage. I felt it made sense. That my life only served so that algorithm squared its numbers. I write you because you were the only real thing, and because I need from you. I need to avoid this happening. I must try, and you, friend, I think you can help me. They already used you. You already fulfilled your function of absent friend. So now you are a free variable. If you read this, if someone back there knows this is not an accident, maybe it generates a parity error, a bug. They just blocked the door of the room. Only opens if I accept the route to work. My legs move alone. I have fear. I don't want to go. The message cuts there. I tried to call. The number does not exist. I have been shaking for hours, looking through the window, waiting to see something that shouldn't be there. Before, I thought the accident was fault of the drunk driver. Now I think it was a mathematical correction. That thing, that mass of synthetic neurons that hasn't even been invented yet, hit me with a car 3 months ago to make sure its repair in 2112 happened without setbacks. Jay is already dead, and hasn't even been born yet. He doesn't exist yet, and his destiny is already determined. And I am here, writing this with one hand because the other still hurts when weather changes. I post this only to fulfill the last will of Jay, to try to be that bug. But being honest, if the system could orchestrate my accident with that millimetric precision, probably it also calculated that I would write this post. Probably calculated that you would read it, and calculated that you would do nothing about it. If anyone is working on neuronal biotechnology, please kill it before it is born. I interviewed him at a diner off the highway because it was close to his office and quiet in the afternoons. He ordered coffee and didn't finish it. I recorded the conversation on my phone and took notes anyway. He had studied the cave for years. He was careful to say studied, not explored. His work focused on mapping passages, logging dives, and reviewing incident reports. He no longer went into the cave himself. I asked why. Risk profile changed, he said. Or maybe I just stopped ignoring it. The cave has a working name in the literature, but he asked me not to use it. He numbered the path 524287, a combination of the mainline number, the station number, and the depth number. I'll call it Falcon's Roost. It's a submerged system in West Texas, fed by a spring and capped by a narrow sinkhole. Entry requires technical cave diving. There is no direct ascent once inside. He described the layout in practical terms. Long penetrations, no large chambers. Silt that stays suspended once disturbed. Navigation that depends entirely on guideline discipline. I asked about depth. Depth matters less than distance, he said. You're committed early. At one point he mentioned that the water temperature was higher than expected, usually high 70s, warmer than most caves in the region. Does that change anything? I asked. A little, he said. People work harder without realizing it, but it's not the main issue. He said the main issue was planning assumptions, models that looked fine on paper, margins that disappeared when multiplied by time and task load. He talked about gas management failures, navigation errors, and missed decision points. None of it sounded dramatic. I asked how many people had died there. He said he didn't keep account. He tracked incidents, not outcomes. What stays consistent, he said, is that everyone thinks they understand the cave after the first successful dive. He showed me notes from the previous surveys, numbers, short comments, equipment serials. One page listed instruments that stopped reporting mid-dive. No conclusions were written next to them. When I asked why he agreed to the interview, he said he was tired of seeing the cave described as mysterious or extreme. It isn't, he said. It's just a system with no margin. That night, when I started writing, I tried to summarize what he had told me. I wrote a sentence, then deleted it. I wrote another, and removed that too. Eventually, I settled on something accurate enough to keep. I spoke to her over a video call because she lived too far away to meet in person. She said the distance was one of the reasons she never tried to see the cave herself. She worked a regular job, did weekend dives when she could, and followed exploration projects online. She described herself as an enthusiast. She corrected herself and said hobbyist instead. She had heard about the cave years ago through forums and shared maps. She knew the basic outline: submerged, long penetrations, limited exits. She said it was the kind of place people argued about without ever going there. I looked into it, she said. Training, travel, logistics. It was never realistic. She listed the reasons without prompting: the cost, the certifications, the time off work, The fact that the cave was in a part of the country she had never been to, and didn't have a reason to visit otherwise. She paused, then added that she followed the dives closely anyway, read reports, watched footage when it was shared. She said she liked understanding systems, even ones she wouldn't enter. I asked how she knew about the fatality. She nodded once, like she had expected the question. A friend of mine went in, she said. Not recently, but that cave. She didn't give her friend's name. She said they had trained together years earlier, recreational at first, then more technical. She stayed at the level she was comfortable with. Her friend didn't. She was better than me, she said, more committed. I asked what she meant by committed. She rearranged her life around diving, she said. I didn't. There was a delay in the audio. She waited for it to catch up. Is that why you're calling? She asked. Because of what happened? I asked her what she had heard. She said she never blamed the cave. She never blamed her friend either. She said there were always explanations, even if they weren't satisfying. I stopped following it closely after that, she said. Still read things, just not the comments. I thanked her for talking with me. She said it was fine. Then she added that she hoped I wasn't trying to turn it into something it wasn't. It's just a place, she said. Most of us only ever know it from a distance. She added one other thing, almost as an aside. Her friend had never been especially strong. Not weak exactly, but careful about her limits. She had been born early and had grown up paying attention to how her body responded to stress. It was something she mentioned occasionally, usually in practical terms. She planned around it, she said. Rest days, conservative margins. I asked if that had changed before the dive. She thought about it. Not openly, she said. She said it wasn't framed as pushing past anything, more like it had stopped being part of the calculation. At the time, she said, that felt like confidence. I met with my editor in her office late in the afternoon. She had the door open and her screen tilted so I could see it from the chair across her desk. She didn't ask how the interviews went. She scrolled as I talked. When I finished, she nodded once. This isn't landing, she said. I asked what she meant. It's accurate, she said, but it doesn't match what people think the story is. She said the coverage so far had set expectations, images, language, a certain tone. What I had was procedural. She said that wasn't a problem on its own, but it didn't explain why anyone should keep reading. There's no hook, she said. No escalation. I said I wanted to talk to more people, not experts. People who had followed the cave over time. People who had opinions without access. She shook her head. That's not where this goes, she said. You'll get the same answers phrased differently. She leaned back. If you want the next step, she said, you talk to the families. I didn't respond right away. The relatives, she continued, the ones closest to what just happened. I said I wasn't sure they would talk to me. They will, she said. I told her I thought it was too soon. She looked at me for a moment, then back at the screen. Soon as the window, she said. After that, it's background. She said the piece needed something current, something no one else had yet. She said otherwise it would read like context without a center. I said I wanted to keep working the way I had been. She said I could, but it would change the outcome. Go talk to them, she said. If it doesn't go anywhere, we reassess. I nodded, though I didn't agree. I met him in a coffee shop near the freeway because he suggested it and said parking was easy. He arrived early and had already ordered. He asked before sitting down how this worked. "Are you paying for this?" He said. I told him I could reimburse him for his time. He nodded. "Good, I've got things to do." He said he was the brother. He didn't specify older or younger. He didn't say his brother's name unless I asked. And when he did, he said it quickly, like it wasn't important to repeat. "I never got that stuff," he said. "The cave thing? It was always strange to me." He described his brother as mostly quiet, kept to himself, had a regular job for a while, then another, the kind of person people didn't worry about because nothing ever seemed obviously wrong. "He wasn't dramatic," he said. "Didn't cause trouble." I asked how long his brother had been involved. "A few years," he said. "Long enough that it just became normal." He tapped his phone on the table and checked it when it buzzed. He didn't look upset. He looked distracted. "You're not asking about what happened," he said. I told him I was trying to understand who his brother was. "That's fine," he said, "but that's not what people care about." I asked what he meant. He leaned forward slightly. "You know," he said, "how they found him?" I didn't respond. "They leave that part out, but it's why people are watching." I asked what he wanted me to understand about his brother. He shrugged. "That he chose it." I asked why he thought that. "Because nobody made him go, and now everyone else has to deal with it." When I told him I needed to wrap up, he looked irritated. "So that's it?" he said. I took out my phone and sent him the money we had agreed on. He watched the screen until the confirmation came through. "If you need more," he said, "I can get you details." I told him I planned to speak with other members of the family. "That's fine. They'll tell you different versions." I stood and gathered my notes. As I was about to leave, he added something, like it had just occurred to him. "He was born early. C-section." I turned back. "Our mom didn't survive it. Complications." He said it plainly. "After that," he continued, "people didn't really know what to do with him." He looked down at his phone again. "He was always tied to it, even if nobody said it out loud." I left before he could add anything else. I was in a hotel room off the interstate with the curtains half closed and the lights on even though it was still early. The desk was too small, so I spread everything out on the bed. Notes, transcripts, timestamps, names. I opened my laptop and checked the coverage. Most of it was already published. Short pieces, updates folded into larger feeds. The language was consistent across outlets, even where the facts weren't. There wasn't much left that felt unclaimed. I wrote a brief email to my editor. I kept it factual. I said the reporting wasn't producing anything unexpected. I said the angles we were considering were already circulating. I said we were behind on timing and the story had settled faster than anticipated. I didn't mention the interviews in detail. I didn't say how long they had taken. I sent it and closed the app. I went back to the notes and tried grouping them differently. By role, by proximity, by tone. The result was the same. Context without momentum. I checked my phone. No response yet. I didn't write it down as a conclusion. I didn't write it down at all. I showed up only when I stopped sorting by role and started sorting by background details. Things people mentioned in passing. Things that didn't seem relevant when they were said. Birth stories came up more often than I expected. Not framed as medical history, just facts that had been repeated long enough to feel ordinary. Premature, emergency delivery, C-section. It wasn't in every interview, but it was in enough of them to register. Always secondary, always offered as context for something else. A reason someone was cautious, or small, or monitored more closely growing up. None of them had been born vaginally. None of them had gone through labor. All of them had arrived early, removed rather than delivered. I checked the names again to make sure I wasn't forcing the pattern. I wasn't. The information was already there. I had just ignored it. There was no way to frame it responsibly, no mechanism I could point to, no expert I could quote without sounding like I was fishing for meaning where there wasn't any. Even if it was true, it would read like speculation. I closed the folder and left that set of notes untouched. I went back to the first interview. He had drawn while we talked, not to explain anything in particular, just filling space in the margins of my notebook. I hadn't paid much attention at the time. It was a rough sketch of the cave system, notes written sideways where he'd run out of room. The main passages narrowed towards one end. At the far edge of the drawing, the lines curved inward, the walls thickened, the opening reduced to a single constriction, wider on one side than the other, then tapering again. He hadn't labeled it. There was no arrow or comment explaining what it had represented. I stared at it. The shape was familiar in a way that had nothing to do with caves. I closed the notebook and put it in my bag. Some patterns don't belong in print. Growing up in Appalachia, I heard all types of stories and scary things that go bump in the night. The old coal man, the headless mule, and Miss Myra from a ways away. You know the stories. As tough little country kids, none of them scared us. At least they ain't scared us half as much as the pitch black dark on a summer's night. That is, none except Meemaw. Papa never told us kids why. He told us not to mention her. Us grandkids thought it was kindly strange because Meemaw was always part of our lives. He must have been married to the woman since God knows when. Meemaw put out our church clothes on Sundays. She made us grandkids breakfast every time we stayed over too, and it was always our favorites. But none of us were allowed to acknowledge her. I remember Cousin Patty one summer morning came running from the crick clear across Papa's front acre saying Meemaw needed help. Patty said she was hurt something awful, and he begged, cried for Papa to help. Now, I remember climbing up over a grassy hill to try to take a look. Sure enough, Meemaw was there, turned over on her side in her black dress, wailing while she clutched her stomach. Papa, she... Papa clasped his wrinkly palm across my mouth so fast it felt like a slap. Shut your mouth now, Mary Sue, and leave it be. He told us as tears welled up in my eyes, grew, and trickled down through the hairs on the back of his hand. Papa was a gentleman, and surely hadn't treated me like that before. My heart was broken. I used Papa's office phone to call my mom. My mama come and got me from Papa that day after I called her, and I tried to tell her what happened. She gave Papa a look that could kill. I remember how ashamed Papa looked. It was a few years later that Papa died. Like most fellas of his time and of that age, his heart gave out one sunshiny morning. His funeral was intense. Us grandbabies, all 10 of us at the time, we sat together in a row on a wooden pew. We cried while folks gave speeches about our Papa, speeches about how good a man he was. We wailed like the dead. To some of my cousins, Papa was the only father figure they rightly had. They'd lost the only good man they'd ever known in the whole lives of theirs, and at such a young age. Their own dad's been lost to shine. The minds and the type of typical recklessness menfolk tend to get into. Meemaw sat with us at the end of our row. She was holding baby Christina in her lap. Christina was just 2 years old, and she surely didn't understand what was going on, but she picked up on the sadness somehow. The finality. Baby Christina was just woeful the whole funeral long, crying into Mima's bosom. Mima never spoke a word. Well, they put Papa on the ground. They'd left us grandbabies in a little wooden playpen sort of thing that they had in the rec room of the church. Our moms and dads just left us there. The only one didn't leave us was Mima. Most of the cousins knew that Papa had taught us never to acknowledge Mima. Definitely, we knew never to speak with her. The little ones like Christina didn't know so well. In a corner of the playpen, Mima crouched onto her knees, her long, sheer black dress draped over her. Baby Christina sat, looking up at her when I decided I had to do something. "Tina, baby, come here, baby. Cousin Mary misses you." I waved my hands at her, beckoning sweetly to come and play. I reached in my dress pocket and pulled out some kind of knockoff dollar store Barbie I had with me. I shown her the little blonde doll and waved it at her. Baby Christina's eyes lit up with wonder, and she started wobbling her way across the rug to me. Mima lifted her head, which was covered in what looked like a wedding veil, only black as coal. Her head angled to me and struck me with a cold sensation of fear like I'd never felt before. "Come play Barbies, Tina." I wagged my doll towards baby Christina once more. "Come on, you can pick her pretty dress, baby." Something inside me told me I had to get baby Christina away from Mima in that moment. Baby Christina kept weebling and wobbling to and fro, getting closer. My older cousins Samantha and Jamie joined in. "Come on, baby," we all shouted. We ushered her towards us by gesturing with our hands. It was then that Mima stood, only she was much too tall. Her veiled head and neck were so high, they bent forward across the ceiling. She got so close. Baby Christina, that is. She'd had one hand on my knockoff Barbie doll when Mima peeled her back. Baby Christina cried something mighty, like nothing I ever heard before or since. Mima had her now, clutched in her two long arms. Behind Mima's veil, her cold white dead eyes bore holes into me and I think into all of my cousins. Mima turned with baby Christina tucked under one arm and slid open a window with ease. Mima put one leg through and then the other, and within moments she was gone. When the police came, they asked us all sorts of questions about what happened. Us grandbabies tried to tell them about Mima taking our baby cousin away. The only thing was, there was no Mima. At least there was no Mima that any of our parents claimed to know. No one was at Papa's funeral that day that fit her description. It wasn't until a few years ago that my mother admitted to me that she was adopted by Papa. All my aunts and uncles were. They said that Papa never married, at least not that they knew of. They act like they never knew about our Mima, or any woman that cared for us grandbabies back at Papa's house. All I know for sure is that some mountain woman took my baby cousin that day. I only wish Papa had been alive to stop her. You ever have a memory you wish you could just burn out of your skull? One of those memories that make you sick to your stomach? One that feels like a dream you can't wake from? I wish it was a dream. I wish I could go back to that weekend when the only thing I was worried about was Rico's cheap combos in Street Fighter. But the air in Detroit is heavy with things that aren't supposed to be there. This is how it started for me. This is what I want to forget. You know that feeling when you're being watched but the person watching you is a mile away? That was Faircrest at dusk. I was sitting on the floor of my friend Rico's living room. The SNES was humming, the TV screen throwing jagged blue and purple light over the walls. Rico was leaning so far forward he was practically inside the tube, his tongue poking out the corner of his mouth. "You better not hit that cheap move again, Rico," I warned. My thumb's aching from gripping the controller too hard. You're just mad 'cause you're losing, Aunt. He shot back, a wicked grin splitting his face. I ain't losing. The controller's sticking. You're going to lose, he cackled. On the screen, Blanca let out a digitized screech and electrocuted my character into a pile of pixels. I groaned, dropping the controller against my chest. Man, that character is broken. Rico didn't even look up. Life's broken, man. Adapt. Behind us, Rico's older sister, Rochelle, was sprawled across the couch. She had a textbook open, but she'd been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. She kicked Rico's shoulder with a socked foot. You two sound like you're arguing over rent money. Keep it down before Ma hears you. If it was real money, I'd be a millionaire, I joked, though my heart wasn't really in it. I looked toward the window. Outside, the sun was sinking, smearing a bruised orange light across the abandoned field next door. During the day, it was just a dump. Broken 40-ounce bottles, waist-high weeds, and the empty patches of dirt where the city had ripped out 3 houses years ago. But at night that field looked wider. It looked like it was stretching. The house was sitting right there on the edge of the property line, the one the city missed. It was a rotting, 3-story Victorian that leaned to the left, like it was trying to whisper something to the house next to it. No one lived there. No one even tagged it with graffiti. Even the crackheads stayed clear. Yo, Aunt, Rico said, snapping me out of it. You're staying the whole weekend, right? Yeah, I said, pulling my eyes away from the dark window. My mom said it's cool. She said Rochelle is scarier than most dudes anyway. So if your mom does have to leave for something, I'd be safe. Rochelle smirked, her eyes still on her book. Accurate. I've known Rico and Rochelle for what felt like forever. We went to the same school. Our moms were even friends, and they both have the same name. Michelle. The mood was perfect. Simple. The rattle of the box fan, the smell of fried chicken from down the block, and the low-frequency hum of the city. Then, the knock came. It wasn't a normal knock. It was hard, rhythmic, and confident, like whoever was out there was already stepping inside in their mind. Rochelle sighed, moving to the door. Watch, it's the whole circus. She was right. Kim burst in first, loud and bright, followed by Tyson, who was already heading for the kitchen to see what was in the fridge. And finally Tasha. Tasha was the one who made me uneasy. She didn't walk into a room. She drifted. She stayed near the door, her eyes flicking to the corners of the ceiling before she looked at any of us. Why y'all house always smell like food? Kim asked, plopping down next to me and making the couch protest. Because we eat, Kim. Try it sometime, Rochelle said, closing her book. The room filled with the kind of noise that usually makes you feel safe. Jokes, insults, the sound of Tyson raiding the sausage from the stove. But every time the streetlight outside flickered, the shadows in the hallway seemed to jump just a little too far. Anybody want to hear something creepy? Kim asked, her voice dropping an octave. Rico rolled his eyes. Man, y'all always on that ghost stuff. Tyson walked back in, chewing on a piece of sausage link. He leaned against the door frame, his shadow stretching halfway across the floor. Depends. You want the fake stuff, or the stuff that actually happens on this block? I looked at the window again. The abandoned house across the field seemed closer now, like it had moved a few inches while we weren't looking. What's real creepy, Tyson? I asked. Tyson didn't smile. He just stared at the dark glass of the window. You ever hear of the pig lady? The fan clicked. The TV buzzed. And for the first time that night, the house felt very, very cold. Tyson let the silence sit there, heavy and suffocating, until the only sound was the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of the box fan. "The pig lady," he finally repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Folks say she lived in the slaughterhouse district back in the 40s. Something went wrong, a fire, or maybe something she did to herself. Now she don't have a face. Not a human one anyway." Rico let out a jagged, nervous laugh. "Man, that's just some urban legend to keep us off the property." "Is it?" Tasha spoke up from her corner. She hadn't moved since she entered. Her eyes were fixed on the reflection in the darkened TV screen. "My grandma says the ground under that field is sour. She says when the city tore those houses down, they did it because the houses were screaming." "All right, enough," Rochelle snapped, though I noticed her fingers were white where she gripped the edge of her textbook. "It's Friday night. We aren't doing this." But the seed was planted. I could feel a low-level hum in the back of my skull. Every time I looked at the window, the reflection of the living room felt wrong. It was like the room in the glass was a second late catching up to our movements. "I bet y'all wouldn't even walk to the porch," Kim teased, her eyes gleaming with that reckless energy she always had. Me and Rico gave each other that look, like we about to run just talking about it. "I ain't scared of no old house," Rico barked, though he didn't move. "Prove it," Kim challenged. "Truth or dare, and I already know what the dare is." "Truth or dare?" Rochelle laughed, but it was a dry, humorless sound. She slammed her textbook shut, the dust motes dancing in the lamplight. "Absolutely not. Every time we play that, someone ends up crying, or the cops end up at the door because Kim dared someone to throw eggs at a patrol car. We're staying inside. We're being civilized." "Civilized is boring, Ro," Tyson groaned, his massive frame shifting in the recliner. He'd finished the sausages and was now eyeing a bowl of stale chips. "Besides, Aunt is staying the whole weekend. Rico just told us. You really gonna make us leave him here just to play Street Fighter until his thumbs bleed?" "Wait, Aunt's staying?" Kim's eyes lit up with a predatory sort of glee. She turned to me. "And you didn't say nothing? Man, if I gotta go back to my house and listen to my auntie argue with the cable company all night, I'm gonna lose it." "Can we stay?" Tasha asked quietly. It was the most she'd spoken all night. She was still tucked into the corner near the hallway, her fingers nervously twisting a loose thread on her hoodie. "My house feels loud tonight. I don't want to be there." Rico looked at Rochelle. Rochelle looked at the ceiling, praying for patience. "Please," Kim begged, pouting with exaggerated drama like usual. "We'll be good. We'll even help with the dishes. Maybe." "Ma's gonna kill us," Rico muttered, though I could see he wanted the company. The house felt too big with just the three of us when the sun went down. "She's about to head out for her shift," Rochelle said, checking her watch. "If she says yes, you stay. If she says no, you're out the door the second her car pulls out the driveway. Understood?" A chorus of bet and thank you erupted. A few minutes later, Michelle, Rico, and Rochelle's mom came down the hall in her nurse's scrubs, smelling like peppermints and industrial soap. She was tired, the dark circles under her eyes deep enough to hold shadows. But she had that soft mom heart. "Fine," she sighed, pointing a finger at Tyson. "But if I come home and my fridge is empty, Tyson, you're paying me back in manual labor, and Rochelle is in charge. I mean it. No wandering, no trouble." "Yes, ma'am," the three of them said in a practiced, perfect unison. We watched from the window as her taillights faded into the Detroit haze. The second the sound of her engine vanished, the atmosphere shifted. The grown-up air left the room, replaced by a jittery electric tension. "All right," Kim said, dropping onto the floor and crossing her legs. Since Rochelle is a fun killer and won't let us play truth or dare yet, let's talk about why we're actually staying. Let's talk about the stuff people don't say out loud. You mean ghost stories? I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. Real ones, Tyson said. We went around the circle. Kim told a story about some hitchhiker of 8 Mile that felt like something she'd read on a forum. Rico told a story about a haunted barber shop on the west side that made us laugh more than scream. But then Tasha spoke. My grandma, she started, her voice so low we had to lean in. She says that before the city tore those 3 houses down across the field, there was someone who lived in the middle one. They kept animals in the basement, not for food, for company. She said they started sounding like those animals. Grunting, squealing. One night, the neighbors heard a scream that sounded like a person being put through a meat grinder. When the police came, the person who lived there was gone, but the animals were fat, real fat, and they had human hair stuck in their teeth. Silence fell over the room. The box fan clicked. Clack, clack, clack. That's just a story, Tasha, Rico said, his voice cracking slightly. Then why did the city tear the houses down? Tasha asked. Nothing grows there, Rico. Not even the weeds look right. Man, whatever, Tyson said, clapping his hands together to break the spell. I'm bored of talking. Let's do it. Truth or dare, right now. Simple stuff first to get the blood flowing. We started easy. Rico had to call his crush and hang up. He turned bright red. Kim had to do a handstand against the door for 30 seconds. Tyson had to eat a spoonful of hot sauce and mustard. We were laughing, the dread from Tasha's story beginning to recede. Then Kim turned to me and Rico. Her smile wasn't friendly anymore. It was sharp. Aunt, Rico, she said, I dare you both to go out there, walk across the field, stand on the porch of the house, count to 10, then come back. My stomach did a slow, cold roll. I looked at Rico. He looked like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards. The house? I whispered. The house, Kim reaffirmed, unless you're both just talk. The room went quiet again. The flickering streetlight outside cast a long, skeletal shadow of the window frame across the floor, pointing straight toward the field. Fine, I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. We'll do it. The air outside the front door was different from the air inside. Inside it was heavy with the smell of Rico's house, old carpet, pine sol, and the lingering scent of fried sausage. Outside, the night felt hollow. It was that weird, dead silence you only get in the city when the wind dies down and the streetlights hum just a little too loud. You don't have to do this, Aunt, Rico whispered as we stepped onto the sidewalk. His voice was thin, like paper tearing. And let Kim hold this over us for the rest of the year? No, I said, though my legs felt like they were made of lead. 10 seconds, Rico. We count fast. We run back. Easy. We stepped off the concrete and into the field. The grass wasn't just overgrown. It was thick and oily, dragging against our shins. Every step felt like the ground was trying to hold on to us. As we approached the house, the light from the street lamp seemed to fail. It didn't just get darker. The light seemed to be repelled by the structure, curving around it like water around a stove. The house loomed. Up close, the rotting Victorian looked less like a building and more like a carcass. The wood was gray and peeling, like dead skin. We reached the porch. The steps groaned under our weight. A deep, wet sound like a bone snapping in slow motion. 1, I whispered. 2, Rico countered, his eyes darting toward the black void of the front window. 3, 4. At 5, the sound started. It came from right behind the front door. It wasn't a knock. It was a rhythmic, wet thud, 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 like something heavy and fleshy was being swung against the door from the inside. Then a long rattling breath, congested, bubbling with fluid, followed by a sharp, guttural sound. Rico didn't even wait for 6. He spun around and bolted. I was right on his heels, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it was going to burst through my ribs. We scrambled back across the field, the weeds hissing against our clothes, until we burst through Rico's front door and slammed it shut, sliding the deadbolt home with a frantic click. "Whoa, whoa!" Tyson laughed, jumping back from the door. "Y'all look like you saw the devil himself." "Something was in there," Rico gasped, doubled over with his hands on his knees, his face the color of ash. "Something big. It hit the door. It sounded like an animal." Kim crossed her arms, a skeptical smirk on her face. "It was probably a stray dog or a squatter. You didn't even stay for the full 10 seconds. I was watching through the window. You hit that porch and turned tail in 5. "It wasn't a dog, Kim," I snapped, my hand still shaking. "I'm telling you, it was right there, right behind the wood." "You guys didn't do the dare right," Kim insisted, shaking her head. "A dare is a dare. If you don't finish it, it doesn't count. You are officially the biggest scrubs." "Scrubs?" Rico bristled, his fear suddenly turning into defensive anger. "We went out there. I didn't see you moving toward the door. You're sitting here acting tough behind a locked deadbolt. You're the chicken, Kim. You and Tyson and Tasha." "I ain't no chicken," Tyson growled, standing up. "I'll go right now." "Then let's go," I challenged, the adrenaline making me reckless. "Since you're so brave, Tyson, let's all go. If it's just a squatter, then 6 of us can handle it." "No," Rochelle said firmly, standing up from the couch. "Nobody is going back out there. Ma said stay inside." "Oh, come on, Ro," Kim teased. "You scared too? The big, bad babysitter is afraid of an empty house?" "I'm not afraid." Rochelle narrowed her eyes. "I'm being smart." "You're being a scrub," Rico chimed in, emboldened by my side. "A total scrub. Just admit you're terrified of a pile of old wood." The bickering went on for 10 minutes, the kind of circular, ego-driven arguing that only happens when you're trying to prove you aren't the weakest link. Eventually, the pressure shifted. The room felt smaller, the air tighter. Maybe it was the peer pressure, or maybe it was something pulling at us. But the decision was made. "Fine," Rochelle snapped, grabbing her heavy flashlight from the kitchen drawer. 3 minutes. We go in, we stand in the foyer, we come back. That's it. Then we lock the door for the rest of the weekend, and I don't want to hear another word about that house. We walked out as a group this time, the 6 of us, shoulder to shoulder. As we crossed the field, the temperature dropped. Not a breeze, just a sudden, bone-deep chill. Tasha stopped at the edge of the dirt. "I don't like this," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the upper windows. "The house, it looks different from here. Like, it's taller." "It's just the angle, Tasha. Stay close," Tyson said, though he was gripping her arm tighter than he needed to. As we stepped onto the porch, the smell hit us. It was a thick scent of old grease and copper. It smelled like a butcher shop that had been left in the sun. Rochelle pushed the front door. It didn't creak. It swung open silently, as if the hinges had been freshly oiled. The foyer was a cavern of shadows. Rochelle's flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing peeling wallpaper and a floor covered in a thick layer of gray dust. Except for the center of the room, the dust there had been swept away, leaving a clean, circular patch. "See?" Kim whispered, her voice wavering despite her bravado. "Nothing here, just an old creak." It came from above us. A slow, heavy footstep, then another. Thud, thud, thud. "Someone's upstairs," Tyson whispered, his voice dropping an octave. I looked toward the back of the house. In the kitchen I saw a shadow move. Not a person-shaped shadow. It was too wide, too low to the ground. It darted across the doorway and vanished. "Did you see that?" I asked, my throat dry. "See what?" Rico asked, but he was staring at the hallway mirror. "Aunt, look at the mirror." The mirror was cracked, a jagged line splitting it in half. In the reflection, the hallway behind us wasn't empty. There were shapes, pale, blurred faces peeling out from the darkness of the dining room. But when I turned around, there was nothing but shadows. "I feel sick," Tasha said, her breath hitching. "The walls, they're vibrating." She was right. I put my hand against the foyer wall. It wasn't solid. It felt like it was pulsing, a slow, rhythmic throb that matched the heavy footsteps upstairs. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. Crash. A sound like 1,000 panes of glass shattering exploded from the basement. It was followed by a horrific, metallic screech, the sound of iron being twisted and torn apart. The entire house shuddered, the floorboards bucking under our feet. "Get out!" Tyson screamed. We didn't need to be told twice. We scrambled for the door, tumbling over each other in a blind panic. We didn't stop until we were back in Rico's living room, gasping for air, the sound of that basement crash still ringing in our ears like a physical bruise. We slammed the door and locked it, but as I looked at the wood of the door, I realized something. The thudding from earlier hadn't stopped. It was just quieter now. The living room felt different when we burst back in. It wasn't just that we were spooked. The space itself felt like it had been violated. The warmth was gone, replaced by a damp, stagnant chill that seemed to seep out of the vents. "Did you hear that? That wasn't no squatter," Rico yelled, his chest heaving. "That sound in the basement, that was metal, like someone was ripping the furnace out of the floor." Tyson slammed his back against the front door, his eyes wide. "I'm telling y'all, I saw something in the kitchen. It was too big to be a dog. It was like gray and slick." "Y'all are just tripping now," Kim snapped, though her hands were shoved deep into her pockets to hide the shaking. "Fear makes you see stuff. Adrenaline, man. We went in, we got scared, we ran. That's it. It's over." "It's not over," Tasha whispered, sitting on the very edge of the couch. "I can still feel it, like a ringing in my ears." We spent the next hour bickering, trying to rationalize the irrational. Rochelle was pacing, her face set in a hard mask of big sister responsibility. "Everyone just calm down," she commanded. "It's 11:30. We're inside. The door is locked. We are fine." She walked over to the coffee table where she'd left her schoolwork. She paused, her brow furrowed. "Wait, where's my trig book?" "You probably left it in the kitchen," I said. "No, Aunt, I left it right here, on top of my notebook." The book was gone, not just moved. Gone. We checked under the couch, the kitchen table, even the bathroom. Nothing. It was like the house had simply swallowed it. Beep, beep, beep. We all jumped. The sound was coming from the kitchen, We scrambled in to find the microwave running. The timer was counting down from 99.99, and the turntable was spinning empty. "Who touched the microwave?" Rochelle demanded. "Nobody's been in here," Rico shouted, hitting the cancel button. The machine died, but the smell of burnt popcorn and old copper, the same smell from the house, wafted out of the vents. A minute later, Kim went to the bathroom to splash water on her face. We were all still in the kitchen when we heard the scream. It wasn't a scary movie scream. It was a genuine, throat-tearing shriek of pure terror. We found her collapsed on the bathroom floor, pointing at the vanity mirror. "His face," she sobbed, clutching Rochelle's waist. "Tyson, I looked in the mirror, and Tyson was standing behind me, but he didn't have no eyes, just black holes and hair, long black hair coming out of his mouth." Tyson looked at his own reflection. He looked normal, terrified, but normal. "I'm right here, Kim. I didn't even leave the hallway." "It's the house," Tasha said, her voice dead and flat. By 1 a.m., we tried to force a sense of normalcy. Rico popped a VHS of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles into the player. "Just watch the movie," he muttered. "Focus on the turtles. Focus on New York, not Detroit." We huddled together on the floor and the couch. For 20 minutes it worked. Michelangelo was making jokes about pizza, and we were actually starting to breathe again. Then the screen glitched. High voltage static tore across the image, turning the green of the turtles into a sickly, bruised purple. The audio slowed down, the voices dropping into a deep, demonic growl. The scene shifted. It wasn't New York anymore. It was a grainy, black and white shot of a basement. Rico's basement. I saw the stairs, the ones we had walked past 100 times. A figure was huddled in the corner, wrapped in a tattered floral dress. She was hunched over something, her back to the camera. Then she turned her head. It wasn't a face, it was a snout, wet, pink, and twitching. The screen snapped back to the movie. Leonardo was swinging his katanas. Did y'all see that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "See what?" Tyson asked, though he was gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles were white. "It was just a tracking error. Old tape, Aunt. Just an old tape." Around 2:30 a.m., screams started outside. They were distant at first, echoing down the block. It sounded like someone being chased, or maybe a drunk losing their mind. "Just crackheads," Rico whispered, though he didn't sound convinced. "Block is always loud on Fridays." But the screams didn't move past the house. They stayed right outside the window, and then they changed. They didn't sound like screams anymore. They sounded like someone trying to imitate a human voice. A high, mocking, "Help me, please help me," that ended in a wet, rhythmic snorting. We decided to sleep in a pack in the living room, lights on, TV on mute. Sleep was a joke. I'd drift off for 10 minutes only to wake up because I felt something brushing against my hair. I'd look up and see a shape, a tall, hunched shadow, standing by the coat rack. But when I rubbed my eyes, it was just the coats. "Aunt," Rico whispered from the floor beside me. "Did you say my name?" "No, man." Someone whispered, "Rico, right in my ear," he said, his voice shaking. It sounded like my mom, but wrong, like she was talking through water. At 4 a.m., every light in the house, the lamps, the overheads, the porch light, snapped on at once. The glare was blinding. We all bolted upright, shielding our eyes. A second later, they all died. Complete, crushing darkness. "Rochelle?" I cried out. "I'm here," she gasped. "Nobody move." Then came the sound. Jiggle, jiggle, scrape. Someone was at the front door, not knocking. They were trying the handle, slow, deliberate. Then the sound of a key, or something like a key scraping against the lock. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Tyson grabbed a baseball bat from the corner and crept toward the door, his breath shaky. He looked through the peephole. He stayed there for a long time, frozen. "Tyson?" I whispered. "Who is it?" He backed away from the door, his face completely bloodless. "Nobody," he whispered. "There's nobody on the porch, but the handle is still turning." We watched as the brass knob twisted all the way to the left, then all the way to the right, over and over, for 20 minutes. None of us slept after that. We sat in the dark listening to the house breathe. When the first gray light of Saturday morning finally bled through the curtains, we weren't relieved. We were exhausted, frayed, and haunted. We looked at each other in the morning light. We looked like we'd aged 10 years. Tasha was staring at the wall, her eyes unfocused. "It's Saturday," I said, trying to find a spark of hope. But as I looked at the front door, I saw something that made my heart stop. On the inside of the door, right above the deadbolt, were 3 deep, vertical gouges in the wood, like claws had been trying to get out. "Look at the door," I whispered, my voice sounding like I'd swallowed gravel. The others crowded around. Rico reached out, his fingers hovering just inches from the 3 deep, jagged gouges in the wood. They weren't just scratches. The wood had been splintered and peeled back as if something with incredible strength and no patience had been raking at the door from the inside. "That wasn't there when Ma left," Rochelle said, her voice trembling. "I cleaned this door yesterday. I would have seen that." "Maybe it's the wood rotting," Kim suggested, though she sounded like she was trying to convince herself. "Wood doesn't rot into claw marks, Kim," Tyson snapped. He rubbed his eyes, his face etched with exhaustion. "Man, I didn't sleep for more than 20 minutes. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that sound. Like it was right under the floorboards." "I'm going home," Tasha said suddenly. She was standing by the window, her arms wrapped so tightly around herself, it looked like she was trying to disappear. "I can't stay here." "Tasha, wait," Rochelle said, stepping toward her. "You can't leave me here with just the boys all weekend. My mom won't be back until Monday morning. You know on Saturdays and Sundays she goes to her man's house after work. Please stay." "Yeah, girl," Kim added, throwing a subtle, playful look my way, then felt completely out of place given the gouges on the door. "I didn't say I was going home. If Aunt is staying, I'm staying. We just need to reset, get some fresh air, get away from this block for a minute." Tyson nodded, leaning his head against the wall. "If Aunt is in, I'm in. Rico's mom already said it was cool. We just need to move around. I feel like I'm stagnant in here." Tasha looked at all of us, her gaze lingering on the field outside. She sighed, a long, defeated sound. "Fine, I'll stay, but I need to get clothes, and my toothbrush. I can't stay in these clothes for 2 more days." "Me too," Kim and Tyson said in unison. "I'm starving," Rico groaned, his stomach letting out a loud growl. "Let's hit the Coney Island down the street for breakfast. I got some money left." "I can pay." "We can pay," I added. "Then we'll hit Tasha's house first since she's the closest. Then the rest of y'all." "Wait," Rochelle said, ever the general. "Before we go anywhere, we are not leaving this house a mess. Put the blankets away, stack the pillows, and someone empty the trash. If Ma comes home to a wreck, we're all dead, ghost or no ghost. We spent the next half hour in a blur of forced productivity. It felt good to move, to do something normal like folding a quilt, even if I kept glancing at the hallway mirror every time I passed it. By 9 a.m., the sun was trying its best to pierce through the Detroit haze, and we stepped out onto Faircrest. The walk to the Coney Island was quiet. We passed the field, and I swear the house looked smaller in the daylight, shabbier, less imposing. It was just a ruin, or so I wanted to believe. Inside the Coney Island, the smell of grease and grilled onions usually made my mouth water. Today it made me nauseous. We sat in a red vinyl booth that had seen better decades. A waitress with a tired bun and a name tag that said Doris walked over, her notepad ready. "What can I get you kids?" she asked, her voice raspy from years of cigarettes. "Breakfast platter, extra bacon," Tyson said. Doris scribbled it down. "1 plate of raw dog, hold the hair," she muttered. Tyson froze. "Wait, what did you say?" Doris looked up, blinking. "I said 1 breakfast platter, extra bacon. You okay, sugar? You look like you've seen a ghost." Tyson swallowed hard. Yeah, my bad. I misheard you." I looked over at the large mirror behind the counter. For a split second, I saw a reflection of our booth. But instead of the 6 of us, the booth was packed with shadows. Dark, upright shapes with no features. I blinked and it was just us again. Kim was checking her hair, and Rico was picking at a loose thread on the table. Suddenly the bell above the door chimed. I looked toward the entrance. A tall figure in a tattered floral dress stepped inside. Its head ducked low. I felt a jolt of ice water hit my veins. Rochelle and Rico both jerked their heads towards the door at the same time, but when the door finished swinging shut, there was no one there. The entryway was empty. The bell was still vibrating. "Did you see?" Rico started. "Yeah," I whispered. "See what?" Kim asked, looking between us. "Nobody came in." "Never mind," Rochelle said, though she was gripping her fork so hard her knuckles were white. "Let's just eat and get out of here." After breakfast, we started the walk toward Tasha's house. We had to cut through the edge of the local park. Usually on a Saturday morning, you'd see kids on the swings or guys playing basketball, but the park was empty. As we walked past the line of trees, I saw a shape in the distance. It was standing near the slide. It looked like a person, but the proportions were all wrong. The arms were too long, reaching down past its knees. It was hunched over, moving in a strange, jerky rhythm. "Look," I pointed. Tyson and Rico looked. The shape was there for a heartbeat, a dark blot against the rusted playground equipment. Then we all blinked and it was gone. Just the empty swing set, swaying slightly in a wind we couldn't feel. "We need to hurry," Tasha whispered, her pace quickening. "I don't want to be out here. I don't want to be anywhere." We kept moving, the sun feeling cold on our skin instead of giving off its normal warmth. A few hours have passed since we went with Kim and them to get their stuff. On the way back, we stopped at Wizard's Arcade. The arcade was a neon-soaked cathedral of bleeps, bloops, and the heavy scent of ozone and floor wax. For a while, the 90s vibe of the place actually worked. We dropped our bags of clothes by the prize counter and dove into the rows of cabinets. "Aunt, if you pick Ryu one more time, I'm unplugging the machine," Rico shouted over the roar of Marvel vs. Capcom. "You're trash with anybody else." "I'm a specialist, Rico. There's a difference." I shot back, slamming the buttons. And don't talk to me about trash when you still can't beat the first boss in Metal Slug without using 5 continues. Yo, move over, Tyson said, looming over us with a handful of quarters. You're both scrubs. I'll run the winner. We were laughing, trash talking like the night before was just a bad dream. Kim was dominating a Dance Dance Revolution machine, her movements sharp and confident, while Rochelle and Tasha hovered near the air hockey table. For 2 hours, we were just kids again, but the arcade was sick. Every 20 minutes, the lights would dim and the cabinets would let out a collective electric moan as the power surged. Sorry, babies, Mrs. Love yelled from behind the counter. City's been working on the lines all day. Transformers are acting up. Mrs. Love has been running the place as long as any of us could remember. We nodded, accepting the excuse, but the glitches started getting specific. I was playing Mortal Kombat when the screen tore. Instead of Sub-Zero, the pixels bled into a grainy image of a face. Not a face, really, but a distorted mask of pink flesh with wet, black holes where eyes should be. I jumped back, but by the time the screen flickered again, the game was normal. Did you hear that? Tasha asked, walking over to us. She looked pale. I was playing Pac-Man, and when I died, the speakers didn't make the womp womp sound. It sounded like someone screaming underwater. It's just a crowded arcade, Tasha, Tyson said, though he was staring at a Dayton, USA machine that was showing a video of an empty, dark hallway instead of a racetrack. All these machines are old as dirt. They're bound to act weird with the power surges. Around 6:30 p.m., the biggest surge yet hit. The arcade went pitch black for 5 full seconds. In that silence, the crowded room went dead quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. Then the lights hummed back to life and I looked out the front window. The streetlights were already on. The orange glow was reflecting off the sidewalk like pools of oil. Time to go, Rochelle said, her voice leaving no room for argument. We gotta get back before the neighborhood gets too rowdy. On the way back, we stopped at Ray's corner store. Alright, who's going in? I asked. Ray's gonna have a heart attack if all 6 of us walk in there at once. He already thinks we're a gang just because we're wearing hoodies. I'll go, Tyson said. I need my red Faygo and some hot fries. I'm going too, Kim said, grabbing Tyson's arm. I need my chocolate. Aunt, what you want? Get me a lemon lime Gatorade and some barbecue chips, I said. Rico and the girls gave their orders, and we watched Tyson and Kim disappear inside. The 4 of us, Rochelle, me, Tasha, and Rico, waited on the sidewalk. The streetlights above us were buzzing with a high-pitched, angry hum, flickering in a way that made our shadows dance and stretch unnaturally. Today is just off, Tasha whispered, looking up at the sky. It's too quiet, even for a Saturday. It's just the power stuff, Rochelle said, though she kept looking over her shoulder toward the field. The whole grid is probably messed up. Hey, Aunt, when we get back, we finishing that Martin marathon? Man, forget Martin, Rico chimed in. We gotta watch Tales from the Hood. It's a classic. Bang. A massive metallic crash echoed from the alleyway behind the store. It sounded like an industrial dumpster had been picked up and slammed against the brick wall. We all jumped, Rico nearly tripping over his own feet. What the hell was that? I hissed. A second later, a scruffy-looking guy stumbled out from behind the trash bins, muttering to himself and kicking a loose can. He didn't even look at us as he wandered off down the street. Just a crackhead, Rochelle sighed, her hand over her heart. My God, we are all on edge. Tyson and Kim kicked the door open, laughing and carrying 2 plastic bags overflowing with junk food. Kim walked straight up to me, pulling out my Gatorade. She leaned in close, giving me a smirk and a quick wink. Here you go, Spec Ops, she teased, her eyes lingering on mine for a second longer than usual. Don't say I never did nothing for you. We turned on to Faircrest, the bags of snacks crinkling in the quiet night, but as we got within 50 yards of the house, the atmosphere curdled. Every dog on the block started barking, not the usual mailman is here bark, but a frantic, terrified howling. It was a chorus of desperate sounds coming from backyards and porches all down the street. It felt like they were all facing the same direction. They were barking at the field. We stopped at the edge of Rico's porch. The dogs were losing their minds, their voices raw and strained. We stood there for a long beat, looking at the empty lot next door. The house wasn't very visible in the dark, just a darker shape against the black sky. Inside, Rochelle whispered. Now. We didn't argue. We stepped inside and locked the door, but for the first time, the locks felt like they were made of glass. The transition from the arcade's neon buzz to the suffocating quiet of the house was jarring. We put on Martin, and for a while, the slapstick comedy and the canned laughter acted like a shield. We were laughing, shoving barbecue chips into our mouths and acting like we weren't all hyper-aware of every floorboard that groaned. But Tasha? She wasn't laughing. Every few minutes her head would snap toward the window, her eyes fixed on the black void where the field began. Around 9 p.m. the house phone rang, the sharp, old-school trill making us all jump. "Hey, Ma," Rochelle said, her voice instantly shifting into responsible daughter mode. We heard the muffled, scratchy voice of Michelle on the other end. "Yeah, we're good. No, nobody's been outside. Okay, yeah, the dresser? Got it." She hung up and looked at us. Ma said we can order pizza. She left money in her room. The argument over toppings was the most normal we had felt in 48 hours. Meat lovers versus pepperoni. Thin crust versus thick. It was a beautiful, mundane distraction. By 10 p.m. the pizza guy arrived. Rochelle paid him through a cracked door, her eyes scanning the dark porch before she snatched the boxes and slammed the bolt home. We swapped over to Tales from the Hood. The irony of watching a horror movie wasn't lost on us, but it felt like we leaned into the fear. Maybe it would stop sneaking up on us. Around 10:30 p.m., the sky finally broke. A low rumble of thunder vibrated the floorboards, followed by a torrential downpour that turned the windows into blurred, weeping sheets of glass. The lightning was sudden and violent. During one particularly bright flash, the light hit the TV screen just right. I saw a reflection in the glass. Someone standing right behind the couch. A tall, hunched shape with a thick, fleshy neck. I whipped my head around. Nothing but the wall and the coat rack. I looked at Rico. He wasn't watching the movie. He was staring at the window, his face illuminated by a jagged streak of lightning. "Aunt," he whispered, "I swear I just saw a light in the house, like a candle moving past the upstairs window."
Tonight's video contains 5 stories, from an idle arm with a mind of its own, to a strange small town secret, and more. This video does contain some dark and morbid topics. If you are sensitive to that kind of content, this particular video might not be for you. A huge thank you to the writers who allowed me to share their stories. They are the ones that make these videos possible, and there are links to where you can find more of their work in the description. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. Sending in stories really helps out the channel, as it allows me to make more videos similar to this one. If you enjoy the video, likes and comments are always appreciated. Subscribing if you're new is as well. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. It started when I was in preschool. I cannot say why exactly, but all of a sudden, I got it in me that I didn't have a left arm. I'm sure it is normal to some extent. I was, after all, extremely right-handed. My left arm was just this useless appendage that hung there limply, usually just a nuisance that would constantly get in the way. I'm pretty sure I at some point had control over it, that I could willfully move it, but as my conviction grew stronger, what little motoric functions were left, no pun intended, dwindled into obscurity. By middle school, I didn't use it at all. I didn't acknowledge it at all. In my mind, I had only one arm. I didn't even register it as a right arm. It was just arm. When people asked me if I was right or left-handed, I'd reply nonchalantly, I'm just handed. When asked if we should make a left or right turn, I'd raise my eyebrows curiously, and mumble a meaningless that way, the very concept of having two distinctly different hands as a way of describing directions utterly lost on me. Because of this, let's call it a delusion. There were a lot of concepts lost on me, but I didn't mind it at first. I was just different. If people wanted to cling on to the absurd notion that having two awkwardly positioned, semi-symbiotic appendages parallel to one another somehow was superior to having one perfectly aligned alpha arm, it was their loss. I'd just roll my eyes as they desperately tried to explain the theoretical advantages of dual-handed usage. What a bunch of weirdos. But when I started college, things changed. I started getting this phantom pain in my left arm, or non-arm, as I would often refer to it as when describing the sensation to my doctor. The first time I went to see him about it, he just stood there blinking silently for several minutes, almost as if my complaint didn't register correctly. The second time, he just sat there shaking his head. The third time, he referred me to the campus counselor and assured me that the phrase phantom pain wasn't applicable to my current situation. The counselor didn't offer much in the way of a solution, but suggested I'd stop calling it a non-arm. Maybe I should try alternate arm or other arm instead. Maybe there was some suppressed emotion surfacing, or possibly a long-forgotten trauma that needed revisiting. I should do some soul-searching, she said, and then I could come back and talk about my discoveries. She scribbled away in her pink notebook frantically, her elf arm obviously a well-trained specimen. It was the first and last time I saw her. As the weeks went by, my phantom pain grew to a spectral torment. I couldn't go 5 minutes without wincing, and my tortured grunts would get me thrown out of lecture after lecture. I talked to my friends about it, and although they kept a straight face, I could tell they didn't take me seriously. I'd never bothered to mention my rather unique view on appendage distribution to them, simply because they wouldn't understand. I'd get the old, see a doctor, talk to a shrink, try cutting it and see if it hurts. How do you handle multiple cutlery? And the likes, but nothing of any practical use. The only advice that held some sort of merit came from my friend Gladys, who suggested I should start keeping a dream journal. Weird stuff happened in our subconscious, she said, and sometimes it could reveal some hidden meaning. Devoid of any other viable solutions, I decided to follow her advice, and purchased a rather luxurious leather-bound notebook the very next day. I laid it ceremonially down upon my nightstand, along with a disappointingly dull, yet surprisingly expensive pen, and tucked myself in for the old visit to Nod. I wasn't expecting much, mostly because I never really dreamt anything. I sort of dozed off and woke up, the time in between a great big blank nothing, and sure enough, I woke up exactly 8 hours after falling asleep, with absolutely no memories of the event. But then I glanced at the notebook sleepily, and what I saw came completely out of left field, pun intended. It was a poem, just a few stanzas, but the handwriting was elegant and exquisite, like something penned by an angel. I stared at it, at the pen resting in my non-arm. No, it couldn't have been. It was impossible. I yanked the pen from it furiously, turning my gaze to the poem before me. I must confess I feel forlorn, my being lost in sands of time. I fail to act except to mourn. Existence was my only crime. While the quality of the composition left a lot to be desired, I had to admit I was impressed, if just slightly unnerved. It was a soft cry for attention, and for the first time, I almost felt like acknowledging its existence. But I was sure that given the chance, my right hand could do better. The next few nights I set out to prove that theory, leaving the notebook on the right side of the bed, but to my disappointment, the pages remained empty, and I was forced to face reality. My non-hand wrote better poetry than my alpha hand. For weeks and months, I kept the notebook away from my non-hand, I guess to punish it, or maybe to ignore its talents, or simply to deny its existence. But the phantom pain was excruciating, and some nights I would wake up drenched in sweat, the non-hand firmly gripping the alpha hand around the wrist, perhaps in an attempt to strangle it. It became increasingly apparent that it wouldn't let this notion of vigor go, so I was eventually forced to return the notebook, awaiting the result anxiously. As I had expected, I woke to freshly written stanzas, forming some manner of understandable message, but I couldn't find it in me to read them thoroughly. I suppose I dreaded the effect they would have on me, on my right hand, on my general way of life. So I tore out the pages after every night, letting the crumpled paper balls fill up my trash can, like some egregious mountain of disappointment. The phantom pain came and went, but it remained manageable for the most part, so I made the mistake of just ignoring it. A terrible mistake. I woke up screaming, the pain shooting up my right arm so extreme that I nearly fainted the moment I regained consciousness. I don't know how, but somehow I had slept through most of it. It was like my non-hand, left hand, had taken control of my pain receptors, ignoring the torment just up until the point it wanted me to feel it. I looked down at the mangled mess that had once been my right hand, my alpha hand. The pen had torn into it ferociously, ripping the skin in ways I hadn't thought possible. Most of the forearm was a fleshy pulp, and the palm of my hand had several gaping holes. After the initial shock and horror, I managed to roll out of my now blood-covered bed, and soon enough the campus security came to my aid. If they had been there just a minute later, I would probably have died from the blood loss. The arm couldn't be saved. The damage was so severe that they had to amputate it at the shoulder. My pleas, appeals, and implorations sounded to deaf ears. They refused to take the left arm with it. This was my darkest night. It was like parting with my parents. Worse, it was like the most vital part of my life and existence had been ripped away. The void of the departure almost impossible to fill. To top it off, it would seem I had to spend the remainder of my years accompanied by its, physically and metaphorically, heartless murderer. We never truly got along, my left arm and me. Even after the removal of the alpha one, I would allow it to write poems again, and I would read and interpret them just to please it. I would also send a few of them in for publication in various magazines and prose collections, but they were never accepted. I think the rejection slowly but surely got to it, and the poems were getting darker and more depressing, by now having some real Sylvia Plath-esque quality to them. But I was never truly worried. Not really. Not until this morning. I tore out the page and placed it neatly upon my desk, as per my usual ritual, and started reading it. Existence is pain, torment, and hell, trapped in a foul, stinking, rotting shell. Thus there is no meaning, life is a lie. As soon as you're sleeping, we're both gonna die. After shaking my head at the banality of the message and subpar flow of the lines, I came to realize the terrible implications of it. There is no way around this, and I know it. I've never been able to talk it out of anything. If it wants us dead, it will see to it. End of story. So I have to do it, guys. There's just no other option. I will have to find a way to sever my remaining arm. I was switched at birth. It's not as exciting as it sounds. I've just always enjoyed people's reactions when I lead with that. I was born in the early 80s in a small town hospital. There were only 2 doctors that did deliveries, and they'd been nicknamed by the locals as Dr. Hatchet and Dr. Baby Killer. I think those names are self-explanatory. It also gives you an idea of the sort of quality establishment the hospital was, which puts the rest of my story neatly into context. My mother went with Dr. Hatchet. It was an easy delivery, for which my parents were deeply thankful, considering the reputation of the doctors that were on hand to deal with any emergencies. Dr. Hatchet tried to keep my father out of the delivery room, at which point my father threatened to not pay him, and there was no time left to argue, for I was coming into this world regardless of who was or was not present. I was born. My dad cut the umbilical cord, and I was quickly whisked away. My mother saw me for a few fleeting seconds in the delivery room. When she was settled in a hospital bed, they brought her a baby, put it in her arms, and left her to bond with her new child. She told me, when I was old enough to understand the story, that she kept looking at the infant and thinking there was something off. She hadn't seen me long enough to know for certain, but she had a bad feeling that this wasn't her child. She called the nurse, handed the baby back, and said it wasn't hers. The nurse apologized and left. She came back with another child, handed it to my mother, and after some consideration my mother handed this child back, saying that this too was not her baby, and this was really not funny, and the nurse had better come back with the correct infant this time. They got it right on the third try, and a few days later my parents left the hospital with me, their newborn daughter. We moved to a different state when I was 5. I only have a couple memories of that place, of standing next to a juniper bush, and pulling the chalky blue berries off and dropping them onto the ground, of a glowing dashboard of a car, and a woman's painted fingernails, as she drove me home from my first sleepover when I woke up at 11 at night crying for my parents. There's nothing else. I used to pretend that someday my real parents would come for me and take me home. However, I looked and acted too much like my older brother. So much that we were commonly mistaken for twins. He was born in the city hospital, where they were better at keeping track of what baby belonged to what mother. I also did 23andMe with my dad for Father's Day several years ago. The genetics proved out. This is not a story about how I found out who my real parents are. This is a story about how I lost my birth certificate. I'll be honest, as a young adult, I did not have my life together. Certainly, I'd graduated college and had a successful career. My housing situation was stable and I had all my bills on autopay. However, my organizational skills and ability to remember things outside of work was a complete disaster. I lost things. I misplaced things. I threw things out that I shouldn't in my frenzied cleaning, when my own chaos became too much to bear. I'm not entirely sure at what point my birth certificate went missing, but it did. I have my social security card and at one point I used that to get a passport, so I'm fairly safe with having identifying documents. However, now that I've gotten my act together and am in far better control of my life, I felt I should be diligent and get a fresh copy of my birth certificate. I contacted the Vital Records office in the state of my birth and was told they didn't have any certificates from my county, and I would have to contact them instead. She gave me the number to call, and that office told me that they didn't collect the ones from my town, and I would have to talk to them. This was deeply frustrating and somewhat unusual, from what I'd read online about how to get a copy of my certificate. I wrote it off as a problem with small towns. Finally, I called the town where I was born and asked the clerk how I could get one mailed to me. He hesitated, then put me on hold. I was on hold for almost half an hour, and I had to keep reminding myself that this was a small town, and things moved with little less urgency. Finally, the man got back on the line again, and told me that they couldn't mail it. I would have to show up in person to pick it up. His tone was monotone as he said this. Flustered, I explained that I didn't live remotely close, and would either need to get a plane ticket or drive for a couple days to get there. He merely repeated that he couldn't mail it, in that same maddening monotone, and hung up. I confessed that I was angry, and my decision to take a long weekend and make a road trip was partly fueled by spite. I was not going to let petty bureaucracy get between me and what I wanted. Fortunately, I enjoy road trips. I'm a sucker for weird local attractions. But drugs is currently at the top of my bucket list. I booked an Airbnb in a city nearby, and started driving. It felt strange to return to the state of my birth, like going home in a way, except I had almost no memories of the place. A haunting sense of nostalgia, like a phantom limb. I checked into where I was staying late in the afternoon on the second day. I'd go get dinner, I reasoned, and then crash for the night. I was exhausted from driving. I found a hole-in-the-wall Ethiopian restaurant and enjoyed a delicious, if somewhat confusing meal. I'd never had Ethiopian before, and had to ask the waitress why there was an enormous piece of spongy flatbread and no silverware. The next day, I showed up at the town hall where the records were supposedly kept. It was not a large building. A couple stories made of red brick with a bell tower. The air inside was stale and musty, like old furniture. The clerk was a man close to my age, with a pinched expression and beady eyes. He stared at me with open suspicion as I approached. I told him my name, and that I needed a new copy of my birth certificate. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood, pressing the tips of his fingers down onto the surface of the desk. His stance seemed almost predatory, and I resigned the urge to take a step back. For a long, awkward moment, we stared at each other. Then he turned around and walked away, through a door on the far wall, and I saw rows of filing cabinets before it swung shut behind him. He took a long time to return. I fretted, wondering if I should go after him, or if that would get me thrown out. There were no chairs for guests, and I kept shifting from foot to foot, trying to keep my knees from locking while I waited. I dabbled on my phone, and while I was checking my Facebook yet again for anything interesting, I caught a glimpse in the faint reflection of the phone screen, something obscuring the doorway. I turned. The doorway was empty. I walked out into the hallway and looked up and down. Empty. Back in the clerk's office, I again pulled out my phone, but this time I turned the brightness down so that the glare behind me better illuminated the reflection. I considered the selfie camera, but told myself that was bordering on paranoia. This was a reasonable compromise, I thought, not quite giving into what was surely my imagination, but allowing for the possibility of being wrong. I was wrong. Again, a shape obscuring the doorway. I didn't turn this time. Even though the hair stood on the back of my neck, and my instincts screamed that I was being watched, I opened the camera app and swapped to selfie mode. And that damn clerk burst in through the door. He threw it open hard enough that it bounced off the doorstop, and I jumped, dropping my phone and fumbling to catch it halfway to the floor. When I straightened, he had finished seating himself at his desk. A quick glance at the doorway revealed it was empty. "We don't have it," he said primly. "Are you sure you were born in this town?" "I'm positive," I said, trying to keep my ire under control. Getting angry would only make it more difficult to deal with. There were 2 doctors. I was delivered by the one. I hesitated, then figured that honesty was my only recourse. That didn't have any infants die during delivery. His eyes narrowed. "Well, I don't know which one that was, but I do know about Dr. Babykiller. Yeah, I'm still using his nickname in this account. I don't want to share his real name. It doesn't seem right." "Bit of a town scandal," the clerk continued. "We've all heard about him at some point. Those infants didn't die of negligence. He killed them." It was a bit of a shock to hear that. I thought of my mother, trapped in this tiny town, counting the days until her due date and worrying that perhaps something would go wrong, and either I or her, or both, wouldn't survive. "What happened to him?" I asked. "They killed him, obviously." "What? Death penalty? Did the state even allow capital punishment?" I had no idea. The clerk continued talking though. "If you're curious, we've got all the newspaper down in the basement. I can let you in." I agreed. Apparently the way to secure the clerk's favor was to show an interest in small town gossip. He took me through the building and down a cement staircase, ending at a heavy metal door that screamed on its hinges as he pulled it open. The lights flickered a moment before deciding they would stay on. The room was long and narrow, allowing 2 rows of metal shelves that ran on and on across the linoleum floor. The walls were cement blocks, painted chalky white. "It's a little creepy," he admitted. "Newspapers are over here. Don't take anything out of here and check in with me before you leave. Are you staying close by?" "No." His eyes narrowed, but I didn't say anything else. I don't know why, but I felt I shouldn't tell him where I was staying. Then he left, and I was alone among the rows and rows of metal shelves and cardboard letterboxes. They were categorized by year, and I started with the year of my birth and worked my way up. I found a newspaper announcement about my own birth, which I set aside in the hopes that I could convince the clerk that I was born here, and he just needed to look a little harder. Then about 8 years later in the records, I found what I was after. An announcement that Dr. Babykiller, who has served the community for the past 20 years, was retiring. Dr. Hatchet would absorb his practice, as there was no other OBGYN to take over. The clerk had said he'd been killed. I stood, staring at the paper, wondering if I should ignore the clerk's admonishments and stuff it in my purse. While I was contemplating theft, I happened to glance up. Someone was staring at me from the other side of the room. I shrieked in surprise and stepped backwards, hitting the shelf behind me. He quickly raised his hands, fingers spread and palms facing me. A big man, broad-shouldered and wearing khaki work pants. "Sorry," he said hastily. "You scared me," I gasped, putting a hand over my hammering heart. "I saw the lights were on. It's odd to have someone down here." "I'm from out of town and I'm researching my family history. The clerk let me in." "Oh, so you are from here?" He nodded absently, looking away from me. "Well, okay. I'll leave you to it. Sorry to startle you." "It's fine. Has anyone told you that you walk really quietly?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked away. This time I heard his footsteps and the scream of the door as he opened it to leave. I should have heard that when he entered, I thought. Was he in the room when I arrived? How long had he been watching me? Clearly it was time to leave. I didn't steal the newspaper. I took a photo of the article with my phone instead. Then I returned to the clerk and gave him the newspaper announcing my birth. "See?" I said, pointing at my name. "That's me. I was born here." He reluctantly took it and asked for farther identification on my part. I wondered why he hadn't asked for it earlier, but complied. The clerk studied my driver's license and eventually admitted that yes, the name matched and maybe they did have my birth certificate. He'd check again, he said, and he'd look more thoroughly. I should come back tomorrow. He'd have it by then, surely. If he'd known I was actually coming in advance, and he said it like an accusation, then he could have prepared better. It was the best compromise I would get, I thought. I thanked him and left. The man with the khaki pants was outside in the parking lot as I exited the building, smoking a cigarette. I felt him watching me as I got into my car. Initially, I'd planned to look around downtown, maybe find someplace quaint for lunch, and do some shopping, if any was available. However, my encounter in the records room had left me shaken, and I did not want to linger any longer than I had to. There was one errand left to me. I drove until I found the pharmacy. It was attached to a general store, and while it was certainly no butt drugs, it had some old-fashioned charm with wooden doors and a candle display of bottle caps, gummies, and rock candy. I lingered around the prescription counter for a few minutes until I saw an old pharmacist near the counter. I asked her about Dr. Hatchet. I was tracking down some family history, I said. He knew my mother. Then, armed with an address, I went to visit. He no longer practiced medicine. Happily retired, she said. His house sat on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a couple acres of flat, open fields. A modest one-story building, built in perhaps the 70s, with drab brick facing and a long patio on the front. The man that answered was old, perhaps in his 80s, and his hands trembled violently. "Parkinson's," he said, when I couldn't help but glance at them as they shook on the doorframe. I gave him my name and got no farther, for his arms shot out and his withered fingers closed on my shoulder. "Come inside," he said urgently. "Please, inside." Bewildered, I went with him. Certainly, they tell you to not enter a stranger's house, but I feel I posed more of a threat to him at the moment. He shut and locked the door behind me, peering out the window. Looking up and down the street, I glanced about the house, tidy with dated furnishings. No pictures anywhere, none on the walls or the shelves. Thought that peculiar. "I know you," he said, and he sounded so relieved I thought he would cry. I stood there, entranced by the sudden emotion in his voice, watching as he tottered closer to where I stood in the entryway. He took my hand in his own, his fingers stroked the back of my hand, like I was a fragile, precious thing. His skin felt like tissue paper. "You're the one that got away," he whispered. "I remember your mother, and your father. He wouldn't let me keep him out of the delivery room. We'd try to take the babies away right after delivery, so the parents couldn't get a good look. But she knew, and I thought, one baby wouldn't matter, so you got away." I thought, what did he mean? That I got away? But I didn't want him to stop talking, so I remained silent. They were so angry. We had a deal, they said, and I told them that no, that a bargain in which one's life is at stake is not a fair agreement. They shouldn't expect me to try too hard on their behalf. He shook his head slowly, and the trembling in his hands increased. What they did, they made sure it'd stick, and I didn't let any of the others get away after that. I was such a coward. He let go of my hand and began to walk away, back to the kitchen with its scuffed floor. I drifted behind him like a shadow, bewildered and horrified by what I was hearing. Who are they? I asked. What are they? He corrected. I don't know. I was just happy to have a job somewhere, to start paying off my medical school debt. Then they came to me and said they wanted the babies. I went to Dr. Baby Killer and he told me to just do what they said. Poor man. He killed those babies so they couldn't have them. You know, I think he hated himself, but he did it anyway, and eventually they figured it out. I found the newspaper. It said he retired. Of course, that's what the newspaper said. Dr. Hatchet scoffed. Those might get read by outsiders. They killed him. Everyone that wasn't one of them just thought he'd moved away. But they couldn't have taken all the babies. I protested. You can't hide something like that, and my parents never said anything about missing children. He turned around and, for a moment, standing there in the kitchen, one hand on the back of a chair for support, he drew himself upright and his trembling ceased. They switched them, he said. Like what happened with your mother. The nurse tried to get her to take a replacement, but she wouldn't do it. She knew it wasn't her baby. None of those other parents did. They took the baby they were given and never questioned it. So many children replaced with, I'm not sure. I don't know what they were. They looked like normal infants, but... He lifted his head, trailing off and listening intently as a car passed by the house. We stood there in silence as it approached the house, then passed by and vanished on down the road. Dr. Hatchet was clearly unnerved, and that small incident seemed to break him, for he stumbled towards me, eyes wide, grabbing my arm and pushing me towards the door. You need to leave, he said urgently. Go home. Don't come back. His frail body lacked the strength to make me move, but I didn't want to resist the old man's desperation. I need my birth certificate, I protested. They said they'd have it for me tomorrow. You can't come back. They'll be waiting for you and you won't get away. They were so unhappy when I sent you home with your mother, and even more unhappy when your family moved away. I'll mail you your birth certificate. I can get it for you, but you need to leave. Don't stop anywhere else in town. Keep driving until you're at least 100 miles away. All those children we switched, they're grown now. They're grown and this town belongs to them. I don't know what they'll do if they catch you. I thought of the clerk's odd behavior and the man in the khaki pants. They were both around my age. I allowed Dr. Hatchet to push me out of the front door and then, mouth dry with fear, I hurried to my car, glancing about to see if there was anyone else around. There was not. I wondered what they would do if they found out that I had visited Dr. Hatchet. I guess I believed him at that point. His terror was genuine. I did as the elderly doctor asked. I drove and drove, stopping only at my Airbnb to gather my bags and inform my host. There had been a family emergency, and I had to leave. I'd still pay for the nights I reserved, I said, and they said that wouldn't be necessary, that they'd refund me. I suppose my fear bled through and made my lie sound real. I'm home now. That town is far, far away. I haven't talked to my parents about what happened. I only told them that the clerk couldn't find my certificate, and were going to be looking and mail it to me when they found it. Yesterday, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a fresh copy of my birth certificate. I never gave Dr. Hatchet my address. I did, however, give the clerk my driver's license, albeit briefly, to prove my identity. The package included a postcard. A picture of the town hall was on the front. On the back, written in black ink, were the words, "We'll see you again soon." And at the bottom of the envelope, wrapped in a handkerchief, was a withered, severed finger, with skin like tissue paper. I've always managed to somehow hurt myself, from running face first into a closed door to nearly cutting off my finger while cooking. There's actually very few times in my life I can remember not having a scratch, scrape, bruise, or broken bones. Everyone just chalks it up to me being clumsy, even me. But have you ever woken up or looked down casually and noticed an odd bruise or scratch that you don't remember getting? Certainly something that should be easy to remember, right? It should have hurt, so why don't you remember getting it? Why is it just suddenly there? If you're anything like me, this kind of thing happens a lot, and maybe you also wind up getting hurt so often you just shrug it off. I can't count how many times I've tripped over seemingly nothing, slammed my hip into the edge of a counter or table, when I wasn't even walking close to it, twisted my ankle, fallen down the stairs, stabbed myself in the hand, cut myself shaving, you name it. Just a few weeks ago I was walking my dog. I'm not much of a paranoid person, but I live on my own, so having a big dog around makes me feel safer. Plus he's just nice company. I was taking him out on his morning walk, and suddenly my ankle just buckled under me. There was no reason it should have, it just seemed to want to give out. I'm pretty used to this happening, and normally I can catch myself. This time, however, I couldn't. I fell down hard onto the hot asphalt. I managed to catch myself before slamming my face onto the ground, but I scraped up my hands and knees pretty badly. I stood up as fast as I could, and managed to hobble my way back home. I didn't really pay much mind to it at the time, but as I was falling I saw something. At first I just thought it was the shadow of another person, but when I stood up there was no one around. At the time I was in too much pain and panic to care. I was honestly worried my ankle had broken. After some little tests and inspection, I was relieved to find it wasn't, so I wrapped it up, put a nice pack on it, and decided to just take the rest of the day to relax. Here's the problem. I don't like to relax. Sure, I like to have some time to wind down, but not for 2 weeks straight. I hate not being up and active and doing things. Sitting still drives me insane. But what was I going to do? Every time I tried to put pressure on my foot, I would immediately fall over in pain. I saw a doctor, and was told I had a hairline fracture and would need to be mostly off my feet for a while, or I would stress and worsen the injury. I was given crutches, prescribed some over-the-counter pain medication, and told to keep my foot elevated as much as possible. During that time, I started to notice some things. Well, yes, my scrapes on my hands and knees were still healing. I was waking up with more and more unexplained bruises and scratches. I knew it couldn't have been from daily activities because the most I was doing was light housework. I did my work on my laptop, and mostly ate either takeout or some easy frozen dinners, which was leaving me feeling gross and lethargic. I couldn't even take my dog for a walk. Instead, I was paying my neighbor's son $30 every day to walk him 3 times a day. Speaking of my dog, he started being oddly clingy towards me. My dog isn't much of a cuddler. The best he'll do is lay in bed with me, or at my feet when I'm on the couch. While I was laid up though, he began following my every move, and whenever I would settle back down, he'd figure out a way to lie across my lap or stomach. I tried thinking it was just because I was hurt, but that didn't explain why every so often, he'd look into a dark corner of a room and begin growling and baring his teeth. My family on my dad's side is Jewish, so when my bubs, what I call my grandmother, found out I was hurt, she flew all the way down from New York to come see me. The moment she stepped foot in my house, she froze. Her eyes went wide and she clutched her hands to her chest. I tried getting her attention, but it was as if she was somewhere else. Like she was looking at me but seeing through me. Who could have done this? She whispered. She whispered softly, though it didn't seem like the question was aimed at me. I simply laughed and wanted to ask her what she meant. But before I could speak, she pulled a bag of salt from her purse and began making her way to the corners of my house. Bubs, what are you doing? I tried to keep up with her, but for a little old Jewish lady, she was quick. Or maybe it was just my crutches hindering me. I told your father to take care of this. I told him this would happen. But does anyone listen to me? No. Her passive-aggressive rambling almost made me laugh, but I was still confused. Finally, I managed to catch her and place a hand on her shoulder to stop her. Bubby, what are you talking about? Finally, she looked up at me, really looked up at me, and placed one of her hands on my cheek. Her face looked pained and her eyes were filled with concern. My sweetie. Her soft voice normally calmed me down, but as she pulled me into a hug, I couldn't help but feel afraid. Keep your eyes open. They mean to do you harm. With that, she picked up her bag and called for a cab. I can't stay. I wanted to ask why. Wanted to beg her to stay, but I kept my mouth closed and just watched from my front porch as her cab drove off. Since she left, I've started to notice things. Shadows moving out of the corner of my eye, soft whispering. At one point I thought I saw a figure standing outside of my shower, but when I opened the curtain, no one was there. I don't know what made my bubs so afraid, but I'm starting to feel more and more tired every day, and I don't know what to do. I just need to know I'm not crazy. I need to know I'm not the only person going through this, and I need to know if there's a way out. I grew up in a little town in South Florida, and though I've since moved away, I'm still plagued with the nightmare of Pigman. See, Pigman was sort of a school-wide myth that began sometime around the 5th grade, at least for me, and finally came to a head when my parents decided to leave the state. Unlike most urban myths, though, Pigman was real. Like I said, the stories began around 5th grade. At least that's when I remember first hearing about them. You know how kids are. Johnny told Ryan, Ryan told Jenny, Jenny told Sarah, Sarah told Raphael, and a few others, and Raphael told me. Soon the whole class knew. Supposedly when Johnny and his 2nd grade sister got off the bus after school, they were followed home by a man. Only it wasn't just a man, but a man wearing the carcass of a pig head over his own head. According to the rumor mill, told his older sister about the man, and she had simply responded, "Oh, that's just the pig man. You'll be okay as long as you never see him alone." She then apparently told him a long background story that never got fully transmitted to the rest of our 5th grade class. But we all knew to be scared of the pig man. About 2 weeks after I first heard of Pigman, Ashley made an announcement while we were all putting our things in our cubbies. "I saw the Pigman. He really is real." Sarah, the class drama queen, yes, 5th graders can actually be awful, scoffed at her and accused her of making it up. "I did so see him, Sarah. Shut up," Ashley exclaimed, then turned to Johnny and said, "He was wearing dirty jeans, no shirt, and a pig's head, right?" When Johnny nodded, Ashley told everyone around the cubby about how she and Kelly, a girl from another 5th grade class, had gotten off of the bus and began walking together when they heard a rustling in some bushes. They ignored it and walked forwards a few more houses, but soon heard rustling in the bush directly in front of the house behind them. When Ashley turned around, the pigman stood straight up out of the bush, but didn't move. He just stood still and watched them. Ashley said that she screamed, and that Kelly turned around and saw him before they both ran straight ahead a few more houses to where Ashley lived. She said that they even told her mom, but when her mom went outside and saw no one on the street, she told them that they must have imagined it and brought Kelly home. The story gave me goosebumps, but at the same time, I was lucky enough that my mom picked me up from school so I didn't have to risk walking home alone, and so therefore, in my mind, I didn't really have to worry about Pigman until 6th grade. My mom got a job in 6th grade, and so I was forced to take the bus home. It wouldn't have been so terrible, except that my stop was the second to last, and the other kids who got off on my stop walked in the opposite direction. Rumors and stories of Pigman continued on, but thankfully, I lived only a block down from my bus stop, so I would run as fast as I could home every single day. Everything was fine, up until Kayla went missing. Kayla rode my bus, but was in 5th grade and didn't walk my way home. I think she sat a few seats behind me, but honestly, I never much paid attention to her. She got off on my stop, and while she didn't get off alone, I'm guessing that the path that she walked home eventually brought her away from the other kids. When Kayla went missing, our school was buzzing, along with the announcements and the school-wide assembly. Rumors were floating of the Pigman sightings from the other kids who got off at her stop. At least 4 kids claimed to have seen Pigman. But the rumor spread like fire, and it was a bit hard to believe anyone about anything, especially since no one actually saw Pigman take her. My mom was especially worried since Kayla only lived a few blocks away from us, and truthfully, I was scared too. The talks of Pigman, walking home alone, it was all very scary to a 10-year-old kid. It was even worse when, after 2 weeks, Kayla wasn't found. My mom picked me up for the first week after Kayla's disappearance, but she couldn't keep taking a late lunch break, so I was forced to take the bus again. She made me promise to call as soon as I got home to let her know I was safe, which I did religiously. The rumors and Pigman talk still continued, but as kids, it's easy to forget things, right? Even a missing schoolmate. That is, until I saw Pigman myself. The first time I saw him, it was maybe a month or so after Kayla disappeared. I got off the bus as usual, waving bye to my friends Tammy and Richard, as they and the other group of kids headed their way and I went mine. I'd taken to not racing home every day, and instead speedwalking, mostly because of my newfound interest in Richard, and fear that he would turn around and see me running like the wind, but also because of my lessened fear of Pigman. I should have been more careful. There I was, speedwalking along on the merry way when I turned around to see if I could still see Richard, and Tammy of course, behind me. Instead, What I saw was him, the pigman. He was wearing dirty dark blue jeans and no shirt, his pale rounded belly pressing against the waistband. He was so tall, although the added height was most likely attributed to the large, full-sized dead pig's head placed on top of his own. For a brief moment, I wondered how he could possibly see, since Pig's eyes were glazed over in death, until I saw the mouth flop open, and saw two beady eyes peering at me from inside of the maw. I know that it's cliche, but I was frozen in my tracks. I didn't know what to do, after what felt like hours, but in reality was probably only seconds. I turned on my heel and ran as fast as I could towards my house. As I shoved the key into the lock, I glanced down the sidewalk and saw that Pigman hadn't moved from where I'd first seen him. He just stood there, the large, disgusting pig head staring straight at me. After slamming and locking the door behind me, I immediately called my mom and told her that I saw the Pigman. "The what?" she asked in a bewildered voice, and I launched into what must have seemed like an incoherent ramble about the Pigman and how he follows people and how he kidnapped Kayla. "Amber, calm down, honey. You're not making much sense." "But I saw him, Mom. I saw him standing at the street watching me." "Look, honey, I have to go to a meeting, but we'll talk about it when I get home, okay?" I mumbled fine, love you, bye, and hung up the phone. Determined to sulk, I set the phone down on the kitchen table and turned around, only to see Pigman peering into the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. I screamed at the sight of the pig's horrible dead gray eyes and ran down the hall to my bedroom, throwing the door closed behind me before jumping into my bed. I pulled the blanket over my head and squeezed my eyes shut, praying that the window blinds were closed, since I hadn't even bothered to check. I don't even know how long I stayed that way, but when I finally came out of my cocoon, the Pigman was gone and everything seemed normal. That night my mother sat down and had a long talk with me. She explained that while she believes that I think that I saw the Pigman, it simply couldn't have been possible, and that I must have been mistaken. She even took me into the backyard and showed me that there were no footprints in the grass, or marks on the sliding door that suggested anyone had been out there. Furthermore, she explained that while it might be a confusing time for me with a schoolmate going missing, the police believed that Kayla would be found soon, and was most certainly not taken by any pigman. If anything, she had wandered into the woods, gotten lost, and was just trying to find her way home. Even at nearly 12, I knew that my mom was full of crap. I walked home from school backwards for the next week. I told everyone at school what had happened. Richard had side-hugged me and offered to walk me home every day, but I couldn't let him know that I liked him, so I declined. The only person that had a problem was Sarah, who was again in my class in 6th grade. "You're only saying that you saw him so that everyone will pay attention to you," she said in front of everyone at the cubby wall. "I did see him, Sarah. He followed me home and was in my backyard." "Liar." "I'm not. You are so." I'd had enough of Sarah's bullying. "Fine. If you don't believe me, then give me your address, and next time I see the Pigman, I'll give it to him." Sarah sputtered a bit and walked off in a huff. The warmth of my small victory carried me through the rest of the school day, and Richard sat next to me on the bus ride home. Less than 2 weeks later, I was walking home from the bus in a happy Richard-filled glow when Pigman popped out of the bushes directly in front of me. He looked up nearly the entire sidewalk and was so close that I could see the sweat glistening on his dirty bare chest. He towered over me, and the smell was so bad I don't know how I didn't notice it beforehand. I took a step backwards as he took one forward, reaching his hand out toward me. His dirty fingers brushed the edge of my hair, and his croaky voice said my name. At that, I spun around and ran, screaming, back towards my bus stop and back towards Richard. Thankfully, I was able to catch up with him and Tammy, and after walking Tammy home, Richard gallantly walked me to my house. I was still crying a bit, so when Richard offered to stay with me, I happily accepted. He used my phone to call his mom and let her know he'd be late, then sat next to me on the couch and we watched cartoons. Less than 30 minutes had passed before we heard the tapping. At first, I thought that it was coming from the TV, but when it got louder, I turned to Richard and asked if he heard it too. He muted the TV and the sound continued, so we both got up from the couch and crept towards the kitchen area. The tapping still continued. We peered around the hallway and there the Pigman was, tapping on the sliding glass door from my backyard. I cried out and Richard screamed. When the Pigman saw me, he stopped tapping and lifted his hand in a brief wave, which soon turned into a "come here" gesture. Though muffled by the glass, I could clearly hear him say my name. Richard popped around the wall, ran into the kitchen, and grabbed the cordless phone. As soon as the pigman saw him, he began to back away. Richard grabbed my hand and practically dragged me down the hallway, since I was frozen in place. After safely locking us in my parents' bedroom and making sure that the curtain was closed, Richard held the phone towards me and asked, "Your parents or the police?" He looked as scared as I felt. I managed to get out a weak, "my mom," but didn't reach for the phone, so Richard forced it into my hand. He said your name. Did you hear that? I called my mom and she began with, "Honey, I thought we had talked about this." But I cut her off. Richard is here, and he saw the pigman too. The pigman said my name. At that, my mother freaked out and said she was coming home right away, and to lock ourselves in my parents' bathroom until she got home. Richard and I did what she said, and less than 15 minutes later, she rushed into the house in a frenzy, followed shortly by my dad. My dad grilled us both on what had happened, as my mother called the police. When the police arrived, they questioned us both in the same way that my dad had. What was he wearing? What did he look like? What did he say? Etc. It felt like it took hours. Eventually my dad brought Richard home, and apparently explained to Richard's mother what had happened, because he did not seem very happy when he got home. The next day was a Thursday, and my dad called into work and kept me home from school. I didn't find out until a few years later, but as my dad was straightening up after lunch, he saw that someone had huffed on the sliding glass door from the outside, then drawn a heart with my name inside. The image was slightly brown with the dirt from, presumably, the pigman's fingers. I remember him telling me everything was fine, as he snapped pictures and made a hushed phone call. He made me go to my bedroom when the doorbell rang, but I knew that it was the police. The next day, my dad went back to work, but my mom stayed home with me. We watched cartoons on the couch, and had a great day, with the exception of my mother throwing frequent concerned glances towards the sliding glass door. They found Kayla's body on Saturday. My parents didn't tell me, but I heard them talking about it in hushed tones when they were in the kitchen and I was watching TV. They said it seemed like she'd only been dead for a few hours, Kyle. Does that mean that they had her for all this time? Alive? I heard my mother say. My dad shushed her and replied, "It does seem like it. I don't want to suggest it, hun, but I think this might be the guy who... Oh my god. Do you really think that the person who did this is the man who is targeting our daughter? Like I said, hun, I don't even want to think of it as a possibility. But what are the odds? This man, the pig man, starts following our daughter, showing up in our backyard, sending letters, leaving gifts. What are we supposed to think?" I walked into the kitchen where my parents were talking and asked, "What gifts? What do you mean?" My mom immediately wrapped me in a hug. "Oh, I'm sorry, honey. You shouldn't have heard any of that. Go back to the living room and we'll join you soon with some ice cream. Sound good?" I didn't argue or press for more details. We moved out of the state less than a month later. Nearly 15 years later, my mom sat across from me at her apartment kitchen table and put down her wine glass with a sigh. My parents had long since divorced, and my mother's newest boyfriend's apartment was unfamiliar to me, and had no feeling of home to it, so I was uncomfortable to say the least. She bent down underneath the table and grunted softly as she moved a large box towards her feet. "Your father always thought that you should be aware, but I never wanted you to know about any of this," she said, gesturing towards the box. "Any of what?" I asked, setting down my own glass of wine. "The pig man," she said, and took a long sip of her wine before continuing. "The few times that you saw him weren't the only times that he tried to contact you. In fact, your father and I sort of heard from him a few times, which is why we ended up moving halfway around the country. It started with the notes, little postcards, with half-assed poems of wordplay with your name. It was so stupid. We truly thought it was just a classmate with a crush or something." She paused, took another sip of wine, then continued. "No, I'm going to be honest. I thought it was weird. I thought it was really weird, and didn't seem like something a kid would do. We, or rather your father, planned on giving you the cute notes until one seemed pretty creepy, and I just knew that I was right about it being a weirdo." She gestured to the box and continued, "It's in there. You'll see it. We saved everything." The postcard had a picture of a little girl, but her eyes were colored in with black Sharpie, and the inside said something like, "You'll soon be mine, Amber. That I promise you, or something like that. We at first didn't believe you about the pigman thing, but when I saw that card, I felt it deep inside that there was something wrong. She took another long sip of wine. Then came the letters. Long, flowing, 5 or 6 page letters. On and on about you, your hair, your smile, weird details about your backpack color, or about the friends you had in school. At first I thought it was a joke. Some elaborate prank or something, maybe. But in my heart, I knew that something was wrong. The letters turned into declarations of having you, and soon you'll be mine, and I just knew that that was wrong. My mom took a few very long sips of her wine, refilled the glass, and then continued. We kept receiving these gifts nearly every day. The police did nothing except tell us to save them. Then, they found that poor girl's body. Do you remember? That girl who went to school with you? They found her dead, and we had no idea how to tell you. You were so young, but the secret's out, right? Seems like she was held wherever she had been and was only killed a few hours before her body was found. Displayed right up there in the park. We just wanted to protect you, honey. At this point, she drained her wine glass, refilled it, then scooted the box towards me with her foot. The gifts and letters kept coming, nearly every day for almost 2 weeks. Then we received the postcard, the one that made us truly decide to get you out of there for good. Wine glass in hand, she looked over to open the box, but instead spilled her wine and sat up straight. It's in there, you'll see it. But it was not good. It scared your father and I enough to make us move away. It's been burned into my memory. At this she did air quotes as she said, "My plaything Kayla has gone away. My soul needs Amber to come and stay. I've thought of you so much, no lie. It's time for Amber to join my sty. My dear sweet Amber, you captured my heart. Love and obedience, this'll impart. I had fun with Kayla, but she crossed the line. Amber, come now, come join my swine." My heart was racing as my mother nudged the box even closer to me. There's gifts, notes, everything inside of this box. She said, slightly slurring, tons of letters and poems. That last one made your father and I decide to move away, but... At the point she slumped rather than leaned forward and grabbed my hand. Amber, honey, the letters continued even after we moved. I don't know how he found us, but it all continued. For a few years or so. Only a few years. That's why we moved so much. They stopped after a few, of course. It seems safe. But then your dad and I... She finally took a break and I was able to get a word in. I really didn't even know what to say. Mom, I truly appreciate you telling me all of this, and even giving me the box, but why now? Why after all of these years? My mother again drained her wine glass, refilled it, and then took a few sips before looking at me with her flushed face. Honey, your dad called me the other day. He got a package in the mail of a stuffed pig. He hadn't ordered it, and there was a card with the pig. The same card that I received. It had your home address on it and a little poem. I just wanted you to be aware. She slid a Hallmark card towards me. The image on the front was a little girl with pigtails, with X's drawn over the eyes and mouth in black marker, and giant pre-printed text reading, "I've missed you," across the front. I opened the card and, underneath the Hallmark card text of, "Hope to see you soon," was a handwritten message. "My dearest Amber, found again. I've searched so long and now I win. My dearest girl, but now so old. I'll overlook 'cause you're my gold. You were the one who got away, but not for long, I'll make you stay. Your parents were so easy to find. Thanks to them your address is already mine. Your eyes so beautiful, just like a full moon. I'm so glad you'll be wrapped in my arms soon. I missed you much, only thought of you. Can't wait till I make our dreams come true. I'll see you soon, you'll join my sty, and together we'll always be side by side. Needless to say, I'm moving as soon as possible." A little backstory. I started working at Subway about 3 months ago to help pay for the normal young adult things, like random things on Wish and gas for my car. My manager Jessica hired me on the spot, no questions asked. She didn't even look at my app. They were clearly very desperate for help. That should have been red flag number 1. My first day was like any normal first day. I was standing awkwardly watching my supervisor Sam make sandwiches for a line of annoyed patrons on their lunch break. I was learning a lot, and was actually getting the hang of it so well I waited on my first customer alone. "Hi, welcome to Subway. What can I make for you today?" The customer sighed and looked at the menu above my head with a slight grin. "I'll take the meatball sub on flatbread. Footlong 'cause it's cheaper," he said. "You seem to know the sandwiches pretty well," I said, laughing, turning to get the bread out of the bread cabinet. "I used to work here," he said, no longer grinning. He put his hands in his pocket. "Oh, sorry." I turned back to face him. "How did you like it?" "I loved it," he said, now looking very nostalgic, looking at the floor. I just didn't want to deal with it anymore, you know? "Yeah, I understand. The customers can get pretty nasty when they have to wait in line," I said, continuing to make a sandwich. "Wait, how long have you been working here?" he said, looking at me with one eyebrow raised. "Just today. I've learned a lot for being here for 3 hours," I said, laughing. He looked at me like someone looks at a puppy that's about to be put to sleep. Pity. I don't want it. "What?" "I don't want it," he said as he turned and walked straight out the door. Now I know what you're thinking. Wasn't that a big enough red flag for you to ask questions? Apparently no, because I chalked it up to him not wanting to be in the atmosphere that had him working hard for minimum wage any longer. The next day was when things started getting weird. My manager asked me to get gloves from the stockroom. Now the stockroom is by the front door, probably about 5 feet away, and it is multi-level. It is basically a small staircase, with racks full of Subway supplies on each level. There's the base level, then there's a level above where there is an entire floor of supplies. Basically an upstairs to the Subway, with mop brooms and boxes of sauces. Then, from the base level there are 2 more levels that go down. One is absolutely nothing. A completely empty entire floor, with one light that barely lights up the entire room. Then one more down is other supplies, like gloves and trash bags. A much smaller room, might I add, compared to the one above. I opened the stockroom door for the first time, and was perplexed that a Subway had so many levels, and such a big staircase. From the outside, you'd never guess. She told me that the gloves were on the very bottom floor. I went 1 floor down and stopped to look at the very open, and empty floor that was the basement. Nothing but one light lighting it up, and a very small doorway at the very end of it, that I had no idea what it led to. I went down another level, and grabbed the gloves, and came back up to the basement, when I noticed that the light was off. The room was pitch black now. All I could see was the staircase illuminated by the light, at the very entrance of the stockroom. I climbed up a couple of stairs, when I heard what sounded like a very heavy single breath, that came from right behind me. I whipped around to see nothing. Absolutely pitch black. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up, as I flung myself to the stockroom entrance level, and out of the room completely. Sam saw me looking a little in distress as I exited. He grinned and continued washing dishes in the back. I kept thinking that it was a prank, and that Sam shut the light off and made a noise, but right next to my ear. I made a mental note that it was a prank and forgot about it, although I made an attempt to avoid the basement stockroom as much as I could. A couple weeks went by, and I wasn't asked to get anything from the stockroom by Sam at all. He got it himself, which I didn't think twice about. As long as I didn't have to go down there, I didn't care. I met a couple co-workers as my life continued at the store. My co-workers included Dante, Kyra, and Mary. Kyra was my favorite. She was funny and did her job. It was a joy to work with her. Dante did nothing but complain, and was an absolute ass. Mary was lazy as hell, and had been there the longest, but continued to tell people she's new so she could get out of doing things, and didn't help at all when I was alone with her. I worked with Kyra alone one day, and was having a great shift. We weren't busy, and we were just eating and talking. "Hey, I trailed off. "What? Are you asked to go down to the stockroom often?" She cleared her throat and stood up to throw her trash away. "They don't ask me. It's usually a manager. I've only been down there a handful of times," she said. I affirmed what she was saying. "Same here. I've only been down there 1 time." She sat back down at the table. What happened when you went down?" she asked hesitantly. I looked at her shocked. What did she mean? Did she have the same experience I did? "Nothing, I mean, what do you mean?" She looked down at the floor. Her face lost a little color. "I went down to get gloves one day when I was closing alone. It was like there was someone down there. I kept feeling something. Graze me?" The light flickered the entire time I was down there. It wasn't doing that when I first went down, she said as she stood up to go back behind the counter, arms crossed. I had almost the same experience. Nothing touched me, but it was almost like, I don't know. I said before thinking it was stupid. No, what happened? Keep going, she said, leaning over the counter, looking at me very concerned. Shocked, I continued. It sounded like someone took a deep breath right next to my ear, but quickly. The light was on when I went down, but wasn't when I came back up from the lower level. I looked back up from the floor. Her face was even more pale than it was before. She was rubbing her right arm. I had a feeling she wasn't telling me something, but I didn't want to push her. Not the way she was looking. I left the store that night at around 8, since I had the mid-shift. I left Kyra alone for her to close the store. As I was leaving though, I noticed that the stockroom light was out. Not the one in the basement, but the base level stockroom. That light was a very bright LED that was in the ceiling when you first walked in the door. It was pitch black in the base level stockroom now. I honestly thought nothing of it. I thought maybe one of the managers turned it off when they left for the day. I got into my car and remembered something. That light is one of the only lights that always stayed on and didn't have a switch to turn it off. It was plugged into a socket in the ceiling. Did it burn out? I started my car and pulled out of the parking lot. I didn't want to think about it anymore. The next day I had the mid-shift again, so I got there at around noon. I got dressed in the bathroom and came out. I noticed that Kyra's name was crossed off the schedule. I went to the back to ask Jessica what happened. Jessica, why is Kyra's name scribbled off the schedule? She called last night, said she was quitting. Didn't say anything else. She hung up on me. She even called from the store phone. She didn't even do any of the closing responsibilities. The door was unlocked when I got here. I stood, staring at her, and then the stockroom. The light was back on,